believe we have a quorum, so I am going to call the August 26th meeting of the Finance Committee to order at 7 p.m. And I will start reading the script for this meeting. So as a preliminary matter, this is Jillian Prendergast. I am the chair of the Finance Committee. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. I will start with the members. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Linda?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Nikhil?
Yes.
Thanks. Katie?
Yes.
Nathan? Nathaniel?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. And then we also have Greg joining us tonight. So Greg is town staff. You can hear us okay?
Yep.
Greg? Perfect. Thank you. And thank you for coming.
Well.
All right. I will continue on the agenda here. So good evening. This is an open meeting of the Maynard Finance Committee. It is being conducted via Zoom. Speakers on the agenda will be participating remotely, and the chair may allow for the public to provide comments. The committee would like to hear public comments. If there's further action that is required by the board, the chair will adjust the matter as appropriate to a forthcoming agenda. Depending on the comment, the board may, if within the open meeting law, respond with the information as opposed to needing to deliberate on the matter in the future. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and our participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public, the meeting will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast to individual attendees unless otherwise required by law. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, so please take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. This meeting is being recorded and will be later posted to the WAVM YouTube channel. This meeting is not being live streamed. For meeting materials, all meeting materials will be on Board Docs. And we recommend that you follow along on the agenda as posted on Board Docs unless I note otherwise. And we will now move to the first item on the agenda. So I will open up the agenda here. So the first item on the agenda is the special town meeting articles and drafts, review of those articles. And Greg has kindly joined us tonight for the first article for the general fund amended budget article. Justin is not able to make it tonight for the water sewer articles, but he said that he would be happy to come to our next meeting on September 9th. Our written comments and recommendations will be due to Greg and team on the 10th, like the morning of the 10th. So we'll have one more meeting where we can finalize our recommendations and votes for the printed warrant. So if they don't make it into the printed warrant, we can post them online. And I think in the past we've given a handout depending on what we have left. But we'd like to try for the public's information to get as many as possible into that printed warrant. So by that the morning of September 10th deadline. So we'd like to try to get as much information as possible today at our meeting today, and also at our next meeting on the 9th to try to get as many of those articles as possible into the printed warrant. And that would be our goal. So I can pull that up if you'd like, Greg, if you want me to pull that up to
Yeah, let's do it.
talk about the article. And I also got some nice, I don't know if it was a spreadsheet, I think it was actually a PDF that was talking about the difference in the budgets. I'm trying to find that one. That sort of goes into what these different numbers are for.
Oh, sure. I
If
can
that's-
explain. But yeah, that would be helpful if you if you can bring it
It'd
up.
be more helpful than ours. Okay, so I can bring that up. think it was this article or this
That's it.
file.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Do you
Yeah,
want
so
me
there, it looks like there's a couple transfers. Yeah, that'd be great if you
Yeah.
want to give us the top-down view. Much appreciated.
Yeah, no, I appreciate this time. So I'll be hopefully rehearsed because what I'm going to go over is what this page is what was presented at the budget subcommittee meeting last week. And then based on the feedback I got from that meeting, it translated into the article that you see. So I'll kick it right off. So per usual, we try to be pretty conservative in our estimates, both for revenue and for expenses. One of those revenues is the state budget. So I have to take an educated guess as to what the state budget is going to yield for revenues, as well as what it's not going to provide us because of assessments. And I make those estimations in like October, the year before. Like I'll make next fiscal year's estimates in like 2 months, but I won't know the results of a state budget isn't finalized until, the next August. So in this case, I estimated a projected well, and so the end result yielded $126,000 of unprojected revenue. So we don't have to do anything with that $126,000. If you don't spend the $126,000 of revenue from the state, that just means that's $126,000 you don't take in taxes. But that's not that much. It's a $53 million budget. 126 doesn't hurt. But generally, traditionally, we do amend the budget in the fall, and we try to capture at that point, the known revenues from the state. So here we are. Just to kind of kick it right off, I just did a simple ratio of what could be a 60-40 split. So in the past, there's been a sort of handshake agreement, understanding between town departments and school departments that if there was to be, in this case, a sort of like unprojected revenue, just for the sake of argument, if we were just going to split it, what would that look like? So it's about $75,000, about $76,000 to the schools, and 40% of that would be $50,000 to the town. But again, that's not a great ratio considering like the health insurance and other benefits and liability insurance that falls not into the school's budget. So it's not like all the town's expenses, and we don't split all the expenses down the middle 60-40. We don't. So, but for just to kind of have the thought process, the exercise, that's what 60-40 is. So then I wanted to ask myself, what could we, what are the known expenses sort of needed to address in the fall? And generally there's not. So fortunately we budget well enough that there are other means to solve our budget issues other than this $126,000. If I was spot on the projection and I didn't have any extra revenue from the state, I'd have to figure out how to solve for some of these operational expenses without that revenue. But here we are. We do have the opportunity. So right off the bat, I know our fuel tanks failed at the DPW garage. They didn't pass recent inspections. That was like months ago. So in the meantime, we've been using like the garage across the street from town hall because we're procuring rented fuel tanks. And eventually we want to purchase, for the long term, we want to purchase like our own fuel tanks, like mobile fuel tanks, because we're conducting a feasibility study right now, on the DPW garage. So we may not stay at that current site. So we're not going to, like, we're trying to think for the long term, why would we build and install permanent fuel tanks if we're not going to be there? Anyways, Justin DeMarco, the director of Public Works, says the upfront costs for those rentals is about $17,000. So going forward, then you pay like I think it's annual, the annual leasing costs, which I think he said it was $15,000. But we do set aside leasing because sometimes we have to like lease equipment if it breaks or if we need special equipment. So Public Works has a leasing budget. So he thinks he can cover the 15,000, but he can't cover the upfront costs. So that's $17,000. So right off the bat, that's what I had known. And then personnel contracting. So we're always in the middle of a couple of different union contracts plus personnel contracts. And so although we did set aside personnel contracts of $80,000 in the general fund, I don't have the best confidence it's going to be enough to cover. I'm doing firefighters contract right now, dispatchers contract. My own contract is not finalized. We finalized the clerical union, and that's like one of the biggest unions we have in the town departments. I'm not talking about school departments. The school unions is the teachers and the paraprofessionals, and that's massive. I'm talking like at most I have about 20 people per firefighter, police, clerical union. It's still 20 people, and that's a lot. So, and then I'm also a little worried about the firefighters' retirements. I have 2 retirements coming up for the fire department, and they've been with the town a very long time, and at least one of them is a captain, meaning like their payout, their buyout, their sick leave buyout is significant. And so yes, you can see how much the fire department budgeted, because again, I asked town departments for their budgets in like September, October. So we don't know when people are going to retire. We try to get as much heads up as we can. In this case, I just rattled off a couple of different union contracts plus these sick leave buyouts. So my current proposal is, you can just see the math, 33,588. And there's a reason it's 588 is because I just sort of rounded for the difference between that 60-40 between schools and town. So for the school department, again, I got some feedback at the budget subcommittee last week, but the way we budget in Maynard is we just do money towards the school department. So, and after that, I don't control their budget. The select board doesn't control their budget. So really, if it's $76,000 in this case, they spend it as they would like. But we got some feedback from the members on the budget subcommittee that just sort of rattled off some pretty justifiable reasons. And I make note of them here, and then I mentioned that in my sponsor comments, which I shot over to the superintendent, Brian Haas, just to kind of make sure I wasn't saying anything inaccurate. They have an ongoing concern with the end of life of the HVAC unit over Fowler School. So if everyone remembers, we did a stabilization transfer to cover some of the HVAC units over the Fowler Auditorium, but there's ongoing. I mean, that was it a 20-year school, maybe 30-year school? So it's that HVAC units, it's coming due. And then some school committee members voiced a desire to demolish the bleachers. So they're looking to have some money set aside for that. The current bleachers, particularly if the debt exclusion does not pass, which is a different article. I don't know if y'all get to tonight, but it's a different article. The school committee did submit an article for the debt exclusion to build the bleachers and the associated facilities. And our initial expectation was the cost of that project would include demolition, but the school committee at the budget subcommittee said they might want to get rid of those bleachers regardless. And then they also said without any bleachers, with the start of the fall season, they are considering if they need to rent a press box. I don't know what that looks like. So anyways, so you can see I just did 26,000, 25, 25, but I don't know what the actual numbers are. So really, my proposal would be provide the school department with $76,000 and then they do with what they will. But the school department, school committee, excuse me, had indicated their intention to put that money into a revolving account, specifically for facilities. So it wouldn't go towards personnel. It wouldn't go towards, I don't know, anything else. It would go towards facilities, which these three expenses, that's what pertains to. Okay, and then underneath you can see just some off the top of my head costs that sort of concerned me over time. One is I asked myself, what was a department or multiple that I did not provide the operating request for last, coming into this fiscal year? And I looked over my notes. The library had asked for a part-time staff member, $15,000. So I have that on there. I'm always interested in putting more money towards capital. So I just listed that, but I didn't have a dollar amount. Like I said earlier, the ASME clerical union was not known when we budgeted. Like we hadn't settled the contract yet. And so that I knew there was a cost to that. And then deputy fire chief, I'm never letting that one go until I get it. So that's still on there. And then almost every fiscal year, at least for the that I've been with the town, inevitably there's a couple accounts that kind of go, like we always have a hard time projecting. IT costs, labor council costs. Sometimes they're higher, sometimes they're lower, but I would always feel sort of comfortable making sure those have plenty of money in those budgets. Okay, so that's what this spreadsheet is. But this, again, this was sort of like the discussion at the budget subcommittee meeting, and then I took that and I translated it into the article.
Thanks for that. I'll pull the article back up.
Okay.
Comments
Yeah.
are nicely.
So I pretty much what I just said translated into the article. So in the article, the way we budget in Maynard is by these major functions of government. And so, like for example, that $33,000 would go towards personnel contracting, which falls under the town administrator's office, which falls under general fund, general government. And then that public works for that rent, the initial upfront costs for the rented leased fuel tank that goes under public works. And then the rest of it, $76,000 towards Maynard. So it's not the most complicated math, but and hopefully I'm right. I did ask the town accountant, because I did this on Friday afternoon, and asked the town accountant to make sure my spreadsheet was right. And all I'm really doing is just translating the spreadsheet into this, but he'll double check my math. And then and that's it. So the comments reflects everything I just said. And then in the back of the warrant, which I don't have for you tonight, but the back of the warrant is the omnibus, we call it, which is sort of like, it's not significantly detailed. Like we don't go account by account, but we go into the departments within these functions. So within general government, it might say, I think it says select board, and then separately, I think it says town administrator. So like that $33,000 would fall under town administrator. Just like public works, we break it down into like highway, etc. Or public safety is broken down into fire and police. And so that's what would be reflected there. So not the biggest groundbreaking change, but it's helpful. If I didn't have that money, typically we consider reserve fund transfers if we have retirements and we can't cover. I mean, that's what reserve fund's for, like unforeseen expenses. There's always turnover too. So when it comes to personnel costs, like I have a town clerk retiring in like 2 weeks. And so if I hire a new town clerk at less cost than I'm paying the current town clerk, like that sort of offsets some of my salaries. That just happens. And then through the course of any fiscal year, there was always accounts that come up and down. And so by about the third quarter, I sit down and I look at all the accounts and just see where we are. And then I sit down with my town accountant and we look at where all the accounts are. And then we consider whether we need to do like a spending freeze, or if we need to, I don't know, we need to look at and be prepared for what transfers are going to be required at the end of the year. So this helps us because this makes me slightly less stressed come third quarter. But also the $17,000 would be really helpful because that would deplete yeah, it would really take a chunk out of DPW's sort of operating expenses. Not to say we couldn't do it, but I would then probably have to come back to the finance committee for a reserve fund for something else, which still could happen. It's only August, so there's where we are.
Great. Thank you so much, Greg. That was very, very well put, very thorough.
Well, thank you.
Does
But hopefully the comments are clear because I'm explaining to y'all, but I'm not going to explain to 100 so people in I'm not going to get the town moderator doesn't give me 15 minutes to give you the same speech at town meeting. So here we are.
Yeah, I would open it up to the committee. I would say before I open it up to the committee, there might be. So for me, before you gave me that explanation, I said, why is this demolishing existing on there? Because it's in the article about the bleachers itself.
Yeah,
at least in the spreadsheet we got from the schools.
Yep.
So for me, that was a little confusing. So I'm like, why are we paying for that twice?
Yep.
But I mean, if all the articles pass. So, but your explanation makes sense that once the schools get that allocated money, they do what they do with it.
So maybe there's a way I could. I mean, so I sent those comments over to Brian Haas, so he can edit them however he wants. But maybe I could change the language to say address alumni field bleachers facilities, something to that effect, because that could also maybe speak to rental costs.
Right.
Anyways, I'll think about it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to say, is that maybe I appreciate the specificity, but I think in case the article about the alumni field does pass, I mean, it will still require the ballot question too, to also pass. So I guess that this could be helpful in the meantime, because I don't know, they might need a solution before then.
Yeah, and that's up to the school committee. Like they're the ones, like we put a fence around the old bleachers, but there's members of the school committee that still don't feel comfortable with having the old bleachers there. They feel like the fence is not cutting it.
Yep, I hear you. All right, I don't want to take all the time. I want to open up to the rest of the members here. I'm sharing my screen, so I can't see anyone. So please feel free to jump in.
I have a procedural question, I guess. So, what this is good information. I'm a fan of, well, not necessarily a fan, but like I would vote for this. What is our role here specifically for, like, is it, if I wanted to say we're good with this, would I say I motion to support this piece? Because I know we're not approving or disapproving it because you've put it forward, Greg. So what exactly, I suppose, is our procedural piece here that I would need to say or do just to make sure that I'm doing it appropriately?
Oh, I was gonna let Jill. Yeah, go ahead, Jill.
Yeah. So basically, our role for every single article that's in the special town meeting, the annual town meeting, FinCom either has to recommend or does not recommend, and then we have a written comment section about why we made that decision. So every single article, the FinCom does that, and that's because we're helping the voters get additional information about these articles and making our recommendations about. So if you're saying you want to move the article to recommend, you would say,
Gotcha.
I would like to motion to recommend draft control A, and then I would call for someone to second. Then we'd have our discussion period and a voting period.
What happens if it's not unanimous or I motion, someone seconds, and then it's like heavily against? So then the board, us as a board, don't agree. Like there's two questions there. What if we don't agree and it
Yep.
was motioned and seconded and then it's majority against, and the ones if it's some level in between?
Okay, yeah, great questions. So my understanding is that it's a majority. I don't think we're like the select board where we have to have 2/3 for articles. Does that sound right to you, Greg?
That was a super rare
Peter would know.
instance. That 2/3 was like super rare, but yeah, you just need a majority for whatever actions you're gonna take for this.
Yeah. So if I math good, majority of 7 is 4.
So then a follow-up
So,
question to that. Let's say that I'm sorry, I ask these kind of questions so I can understand the process.
Yeah.
If I am wildly against this and all 6 of the other members are wildly for it, am I allowed to even write the comments of the finance committee? Because I'm clearly the one that's not for it. And I would probably write something scathing at that point. But
yeah.
I guess
So
are there
I can
controls
give you
in
an
there for
example.
that level of dissidence? And would my voice, and let's just say I wanted it to be heard, is there a way for me to be heard as that one lone wolf, quote unquote? I'm done with questions after that, I promise.
You can ask as many questions as you want. This is the purpose of our group. So we question everything. So in the past, when there has been contentious articles, we would say, so like in that case, it's like a 6-1. We would say recommends, and then in parentheses, we would put 6-1. And then we would write comments for recommends. And we have also in the past written comments for the members who do not recommend. I would say in those cases, they were closer. They were like in times when it was like a 4-3 vote. I don't know, Peter, if you've had any experience with different numbers, but that's what I remember from my past years serving, is that we've written them when they're close like that.
I think that's generally right. I mean, the committee speaks as a committee. So whatever the vote is, that's to recommend or not recommend. Individual members are free to get up at town meeting and speak against an article or, against the recommendation of FinCom if they so choose. But as far as an official position of FinCom for the dissenters, I mean, Jillian's right. We might, put something in the printed thing if we want to, but no requirement that we do. But yeah, I mean, we act as a committee, not as a bunch of individuals.
Okay, thanks. That answers all my questions.
I have some questions.
Please, go ahead.
Okay. So Greg, you said there's a handshake agreement about 60-40, 60 to the schools, 40 to the town.
Yeah.
But the budget is 20 million for the schools, 50 million total. So the schools get 40% of the budget, plus they're getting a big amount of the 10% of employee benefits.
Yeah.
So why isn't it the opposite? 60 for the town, 40 for the schools?
That's a great question. So again, it's not perfect by any means. Years before, I don't even know when someone came up with this ratio, but it was I think it was before my time. So someone had crunched numbers, and that included all the operating costs of the town. So whether it be like I said, insurance, benefits, salaries, contracts, keeping the lights on, everything. And then looked at what the split might be. So how much of those expenses were going towards school related, and then how much of those were strictly for town. So for example, there's don't quote me on this, but I think there's like 200 teachers. So if there's about 200 teachers and only like 100 town personnel, then I'm spending twice as much on teachers for health benefits than I am on the town departments. So you can kind of use that and then contributes towards like a greater consideration of the costing. And so therefore it came out to about 60% of the costs were attributed to school operations, and then 40% towards town. But again, like you
Then-
wouldn't,
But even that is, so that even of the 10 million, about half is for schools. Of the 10 million in employee benefits, even then it would be half 50-50.
no,
It
it would
just
be
seems
more
like
than,
you're being very generous to the schools here,
no, it's more than half. So
more than half, okay.
right, because like for example, they have liability insurance. Like we have the liability insurance is not covered under the schools, it's covered under the general fund.
Yeah,
So that they have the three biggest facilities by far. So there's even costs related to those expenses. Like it's not that I appreciate what you're I couldn't show you the numbers to be able to determine this. And I'm not saying we're tied to this in any ways. I just, when I was first approaching this sort of like a good problem of having $126,000, my thought was I want to be sort of like politically sensitive and have a starting point just for the discussion. And it sort of worked out that this seems to accomplish my concerns in recommending a budget to the select board, and it accomplished sort of like meeting some unknown but immediate concerns of the school committee. So
and
that's,
then you had two areas of concern. One was IT consulting and one was is it general counsel consulting?
well, Labor Council, good point.
Labor
But
Council, yeah.
I always have those concerns. Like I always like, I just meant that at the end of the fiscal year, there's always a couple accounts that are either near deficit or going into deficit.
Yeah,
and
so like
fluctuate year by
like the
year.
press box, 25 grand to rent, I mean, that's half the cost of what the schools are saying the whole bleachers and the porta potties would cost to rent. That seems, I don't know
No.
where that number came from, but
Me,
even
remember
when you move that 25 to some of the things that are a concern to you that we know are gonna go into deficit.
fair point. But don't read into that split of 26, 25, 25. I literally, I probably should have put just $76,000 and then just listed three, because that's not going to be in the article anyways, right? It's only going to say that $76,000. I again, with the purposes of trying to make things maybe, if you will, politically convenient, is to say a 60% split between the school committee's interests and then the 40% for like town interests. Like I was just trying to make things to be, yeah, like I said, like sort of like politically fair, and that 60-40 has been sort of like a guidance that we've had in the past. So again, like that, you would have to ask the school department about how they would actually spend that, in this case, $76,000. But I didn't have I didn't feel, and I still don't yet have like a strong argument as to why I would need that $126,000 for town departments. And I didn't hear from the school department why they would need $126,000. And so, lacking any sort of definitive, like strong argument either way, I went with sort of like the known traditional ratio.
You said that the schools were gonna put it into the facilities. What other, I guess, is that lawn mowing? What other examples would that be if it's not? Because I mean, as Linda just pointed out, that number for renting the press box is either clearly inflated or just incorrect. And as you said, you made it up. So just put it there.
Yeah, I made it up.
Idea, which is fine.
I put a
But
number in the spreadsheet. Yeah.
I guess what else would that be put towards, assuming that what we just said was correct there?
I mean, they have significant facilities costs. Like they
Okay.
have three massive buildings that, and one of which we're replacing, but in the meantime is still, it has a wing that was built in the 50s. So it's, I couldn't speak to their exact costs. I imagine if it's anything like the town buildings, there's always lights to be replaced. There's always HVAC units to get fixed. There's always, I mean, everything. Like there's lawn mowing. There's because they maintain like the close facilities. Like we do a lot of the major lawn mowing, the town's DPW does, but they, they're responsible for icing their own sidewalks, etc. So they have costs to their facilities, but I couldn't speak to the line item.
Greg, you mentioned that you sort of don't have like a definitive argument either way, sort of in relation to that 60-40 I guess gentleman's agreement.
Yeah.
So like just to make it like explicit, like would you say that there's like no sort of town expenses that you think are like urgent enough that would justify like breaking that sort of gentleman's agreement?
Absolutely. Actually, that was the first thing I thought of is like, thank you for asking that, Nikhil. So like, yes, if I needed the money, I would have asked. So the 17 grand, I knew was a hard number. Like Justin DeMarco, Public Works said, I need $17,000. Easy. If I met with Jean McGuire, the library director, and I asked her how she felt about that part-time library. They want another staff member for $15,000. And she didn't sell me. So like she tried, but I didn't feel like I needed to amend her budget, into the fiscal year. She can, and I do suspect she will submit a request, in the next couple of months for FY26. Same with the fire chief. If I told, fire chief, hey, what'd you do with $126,000? She'd say hire deputy fire chief. But again, like I didn't feel so compelled, and knowing, inevitably the school department is going to advocate for an increase in budget, I wanted to at least sort of like offer, if nothing else, a political gesture of like, hey, I consider the school department a town department. Superintendent comes to my department in meetings. Like it is we're all in this together. So as I'm trying to and a little bit of like, you got, school committee, select board, I'm trying to make sure like we're all on the same page. That was the ratio I came up with. But absolutely, Nikhil, if I said, ooh, I need to figure out how to pay for whatever. If Justin said it was $120,000 to fix the fuel tanks, then that's where the money's going. Because those fuel tanks fuel much more than DPW trucks. They fuel some school vehicles. They fuel police cruisers.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that. And then my second question was just a very tangential one. But just what is PEG access? I'm just like not familiar.
Oh,
with
that's
that.
PEG. Yeah. So I don't know why we've been having it on there for years. So PEG is the acronym PEG, Public Education Government Access. So we have a deal with Verizon and Comcast. We give them public way access along all the streets in Maynard so they can run their telephone poles and the wires, and then so send cable access to all the town's houses and commercials. And so they pay us a license fee to be able to use that, like to be able to put their telephone poles and put those wires in the public way. And a portion of that license fee goes towards this. So, and it's a formulaic based on, subscribers. So how many, what's their customer base? And it's very much like really nationally recognized sort of understanding of what the rate formulas are going to be, and then at the corporate level, and then it kind of trickles down to the town. So we just renegotiated our second renewal of this license. So that's what that money is. Frankly, I wouldn't have put it in there, but that's how the warrant was made when I got here 6 years ago. So still in there because it is confusing. It's just, but 90-something% of that money all goes towards the school department.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for answering that.
Think of that as like it subsidizes WAVM.
Okay.
Greg, I will say I was really curious all week. I was at the budget subcommittee meeting, but I had to leave, and I had bronchitis. It was not the flu. I had a fever of 103 that night, and I was like, I'm failing, guys. And it only was at 102 the next day and went to urgent care. It was a whole thing. But anyway, there was a lot of discussion around, I know, the HVAC money and the bleacher money. Yeah. And I feel you guys really vetted out where the due diligence was with putting those funds. And so I appreciate hearing the backstory first of, the discussion and the urgency of those funds. So I do appreciate where the funds landed.
Right. That's a good point, Katie. When I went to that meeting, the only number I had on that spreadsheet was 17,000.
Yep.
So I was just like, guys, this is what I know I need to spend because I just need it. And we all kind of talked about it for like an hour, maybe more. Like, what would you do with the rest of the money? And I think I went in there knowing what a 60-40 split would be, just to kind of like get the kind of discussion going. But I was ready to receive. So if the school committee had said they needed I probably would have fought for that $17,000. But if they needed $109,000, then or whatever the math is, I apologize. Then I would have said like, guys, I really need, I don't know, how are we gonna split that up? But anyways, so yeah, to your point, Katie, like this, what you see is the reflection of like the point of the budget subcommittee. Like it's like sort of like gathers all the interests, and then I take that as feedback to try to provide a product that tries to address the community's needs.
Yeah, and it was interesting too, hearing, do we put it at pay as you go? Do we put it free? Where do those funds land versus where do they need to end up, and ensuring where they end up, putting them in the right spot to get
Yep.
to the end goal. So yeah. Anyway,
I feel like the school committee was very receptive as well. So as much
Yeah.
as they were kind of like pitching different ideas, they said they recognize, like, if they hired, I don't want to put words in the mouth, but like if they recognize if they were to use money towards hiring, it would also come at a benefits cost, which they are not budgeting.
right.
So
They sounded very against it.
they were against it. I
Yeah.
heard it. You heard it.
Yep.
So but I mean, if what they do with this money, it's up to them.
Yeah.
Do we have any additional questions from members on budget article?
I also want to point out the select board has not seen this. So, I mean, they've seen it because I email everybody all the time, but they haven't like weighed in. I mean, they knew what the state budget was, and they knew what the new revenue was. And there was one member at the budget subcommittee meeting, but that's not final. And I always reserve the right to change my mind, but I'm probably not going to, like, this I feel pretty good about, and I feel like it was received well enough. So I'll probably stick to this for next Wednesday's select board meeting. Unless God forbid some department head comes out of nowhere tomorrow and tells me they need $50,000 for something that broke.
Well, with that, I would motion to support draft control A as presented today, assuming Greg does not change his mind.
Yeah.
For fiscal year 2025.
Okay, so you are recommending to approve draft control A. Do I have a second?
I will second approving draft control A.
Okay, so we have a first and a second. I will open the floor to any additional comments or discussion. All right, I am not hearing any. So I will take a roll call vote. Linda,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Nikhil,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Nathan,
Yes.
Nathaniel.
Yes.
All right, I am also a yes. So this is a recommend. So this is a pass here. So I'll note that down in our draft recommendations. Do I have a volunteer that would like to write the comments from this?
I would be willing to do that.
Okay, so you'll do that for our next meeting. Is that okay?
Yes, that sounds good. And the next
Okay.
meeting is 1 week from now.
The next meeting, so Labor Day, so we don't
Oh,
actually
right.
meet on
Oh,
Labor
yeah.
Day. So it'll be on the 9th.
Okay, great.
Nikhil, you know
And
how to
there's
find
some good
Jill, right?
examples.
You can
Sorry,
ask
what
me.
was that?
Huh?
I'm sorry, Jill. I spoke over you. Yeah, I was just gonna say, Nikhil, you can meet with me. You can ask me questions. You can call me.
Okay, awesome. Thank you,
I'll
Greg.
treat you to a bagel if you want. Whatever.
Oh yeah, I mean, thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's good examples of what we've written in the past are available on board docs and also in prior warrants. But if you
Right.
also want the examples, you can also reach out. I'm happy to share.
Definitely. Thank you.
Okay. I have like way too many windows open and I've completely lost it. All right. All right, right, so, so Greg, in terms of the other articles here,
Yeah.
you do not have, I did have a question about draft control Article D. Is that I'm trying to pull it up. Is that
We
a
can go over all of
petition
them.
from a citizen?
You want to bring it up and then we can go over all of them. Like I'm not like a Justin level expert in water sewer pipes, but I can.
Okay.
Oh,
So
yeah,
I can
actually,
let you
this
know
one-
in terms of,
This one I probably won't be able. So you can ask your question, but I'm probably not going to know. This
yeah,
one's.
no, I was gonna say we got our questions answered via email from the CPC, so
Oh,
I think
okay.
we're all set. So,
Good. Oh, this one. Yeah, go
okay,
ahead.
and
Yeah.
yeah, so for C, we had the school committee came nicely and presented this to us last week. So I feel like we had a lot of our questions answered, and I think this will be a good amount of discussion with the committee here. So I did want to pull up the information that you kindly shared with us, talking about how the rentals are not like a sustainable long-term solution because they don't meet some different code requirements. So, and I shared that out with the committee. So I don't know if the committee has additional questions on that for Greg, because you were the one that shared.
I guess I have two things. Before we jump into this, is there any chance that it might make sense to do this last? Because I mean, I have some questions and I'm not positive that full due diligence was done by the schools on this. At least that's how I read. You're assuming you're referring to the email you sent on the August 24th, right? Forwarded from Greg?
Yes.
Okay.
I agree with Nathaniel. I think that if we start getting into this, it's going to take up a lot of time. I think we should proceed with the rest of the draft controls and come back to this at the end.
Sure, I think that's fair. So the home rule liquor license at the corner store.
You want me to give the download what this is?
That'd be great. That'd be super duper.
Yep. So the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is an old puritanical state, and the Beacon Hill tells all the towns, municipalities, and cities how many liquor licenses we can have. So if you want to change that, we call it the quota, and there's quotas there's different categories. So you can have like a restaurant and serve wine and beer, or you can have a farmer's pouring license, or you can, like, so if you go to like the farmer's market and you want to buy something there, then that's a different license, right? So there's different types of license related to alcohol. And one of them is all alcohol to be consumed off premise. So that's a package store. And we have four package stores right now. One of which, by the way, is Russell's convenience store next to Town Hall. So a couple of years ago, Russell's convenience store submitted pretty much an identical request to the select board to increase their capacity, because they were originally beer and wine, and then they want to go to all alcohol. And so we went through this process with them. This is kind of a weird process because it's only the town saying, hey, we want Beacon Hill to give us an extra all alcohol license, another package store. And so the state legislature doesn't have to do it. So a couple of months ago, I got approached by, I think he's a lawyer, it doesn't matter, someone representing the corner store, and asking if they could have this, for consideration in the fall. So they submitted me, this massive package. I used the language of the Russell's convenience store. I sent all of that over to town council and asked her to take a look at it. She looked at it. She thought it looked fine. But I also sent it over to Representative Hogan's office because it has to make, once it gets to Beacon Hill, they might have different language they want to see. And that's happened in the past with Russell's convenience store. I remember they wanted an address, but we didn't know they needed an address in the motion, whatever. So this now I've sent it over to them. And their chief of staff said he was going to make sure it looked right. So I haven't heard otherwise. But so that's the deal. Like the select board has not taken action on this. So if you want, you can wait as well. But this is relatively procedural. It's just to increase the quota to go from, I think it's 4 all alcohol to 5. But that 5th would go to this corner store after they apply for the license. Like you still have to apply for the license, and then the select board has to approve that license, and then that license still has to go to the Alcohol Beverage Control Commission. So just because you've increased a quota with the sort of intention of giving it to this particular thing, because that's another thing, the state wants to know where the license is potentially being allocated to. Like you can't just increase your quota. Sometimes you can, but that's a different sort of political gesture. This is 49 Walnut Street, and y'all know where like the corner store is. It's like at the base of like Bancroft Hill, like the Coolidge School.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they want to do.
Is there any cost to the town to like submit an application to the general court for an extra license?
That's a good question. No. So, but presumably this applicant would submit the alcohol license application fee, but I don't remember what that is off the top of my head. But this, no, I mean, this is pretty procedural. Like it took me 2 seconds to send an email to the chief of staff. So like, it's not burdensome.
When Russell's got their liquor license, offsite liquor license, was there any impact to like tax revenue for the town?
That's a good question. I don't know.
They haven't used it yet.
That's what I was gonna say.
I think they're planning to build out, but
Yeah.
they're waiting because I think Jimmy's had it open for like the snack
Yeah.
and convenience side, so they're waiting for them to do that. And then yeah. So I think it's a work in progress still, but they haven't done it. They haven't rolled out with it yet.
She's right. Every once in a while I get my coffee too often from Jamie's next door.
I know Jamie.
And I'm like, what's going on? And because he was worried, like Katie said, Jimmy's garage across from town hall, they had these big plans that were going to do this massive like expansion. It was I don't know. I imagine like a Wawa in my head, if y'all know what that is. But then that apparently did not happen. And then but anyway, so Jamie was trying to like be smart about it and sort of like set himself up for like to be marketable. But I guess maybe he doesn't have the equity. I don't know, but he hasn't done it yet. So great question, Nathan. I don't have the answer as of right now. I mean, presumably if their sales goes up, but I don't know. It's again, this now I don't quote me. The select board is generally, business friendly as the cliche goes. Like they try not to sort of like limit the ability of a business to succeed, etc. But I don't know, like if I on next Wednesday night, they may say, no, I don't want to ask the town meeting to increase the quota. But again, like this is an article from the select board to town meeting to ask the state to increase the quota to give them a license.
And a yes vote would authorize the select board to petition the Commonwealth. But if the select board opposes it, they could still say no and not submit it. They wouldn't be bound by this vote.
No, oh no, we would. So like the like this vote says the intentions of the select board is to send it to the home rule petition. I don't know about the legal binding of this action. I suspect, I'm not sure, but generally I would the select board usually, like if they're going to put something on the warrant, it's because they're going to take action on it.
Have any of the existing license holders like petitioned the select board against granting an additional license?
That's a great question. No, but this hasn't been advertised really. So that's a good question. Not that I know of. They're relatively geographically dispersed. So we have Russell's, which again hasn't even started selling, hard liquor. And then you got the one downtown, you got the one on Powder Mill, you got the one next to Market Basket. I think I'm forgetting one. So
Arts.
do they sell whiskey? Do they sell like hard stuff?
Yeah, they do.
Then yes, that's it.
And so,
But
like, just to clarify, this means that obviously then that they weren't selling, the corner store wasn't selling hard liquor before now, obviously.
No, yeah, they can't. They have a beer and wine license.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
And just to be like 1200% clear, this would only go to this is not increasing our license +1. It's only increasing it if this vendor in specifics passes the next step, which would be applying for the license.
Correct.
Okay.
Because the article says that business at that address.
Got it. And we're doing that because that's what the state would like to see.
Yeah, when we first tried it with Russell's, we didn't have the address because I was like, all right, so we're gonna increase our quota. But the state doesn't trust the little towns across the Commonwealth. They want to know exactly who's getting it.
So, Greg, did Russell's get the expanded license? They did get it.
I think they did, but I don't think they've. No, wait. It was years ago. So we got the home rule petition approved. Like our quota went up for that address, but I don't think. I can look it up, Linda, but I don't think they've actually applied yet because I don't think Jamie's ready to make the changes.
Okay. So they could apply, but okay.
But he doesn't want to pay the fee, like unless he's ready to like pull the trigger and I don't know what he's gonna do. Maybe redo the aisles. I don't know, but he would like jigger at the store to allow for, whiskey, whatever. I don't know what he would sell, but like he hasn't
And
done
then the
that.
place across from Town Hall, is it Wally's or I forget?
That's Jimmy's. That we're calling it Jimmy's.
That's Jimmy's. Okay, and that's just beer and wine?
No, Jimmy's isn't selling. I don't think they have anything, but there was
Nothing. Okay.
Yeah. There was a discussion that they wanted to start doing.
I thought he had a beer sign out front, but
No, you might be thinking,
not the gas station, but
oh yeah, that's the next one over. What's that called?
Johnny
Wally's, I thought, but anyway.
I don't remember. It's like it's
Bob's or
I don't remember.
Yeah. But they have Kena Lottery, whatever.
Yes, they do. I forget what that's called. I've been in there once or twice. It's a nice little shop, but yeah. It's slightly longer to get my coffee to walk there than it is to go to Russell's. So I go to Russell's. Yeah.
It's called Bud.
Buds. Okay, thank you.
So again, this is kind of procedural. I mean, my guess is the select board would be okay with this. I don't know. I mean, like, I don't want to make any promises. So if y'all want to hold off on voting, you can, but it's up to you. But you can, maybe if you want, you can, just like the other article, you can move to recommend this, but if it's not on the warrant, then it doesn't matter.
So just to like clarify, even though the select board is sponsoring this, we're not sure that they would like agree to it.
That's true, but I mean, that's true for all these articles. Like
Okay.
the select board has not approved the final warrant.
Okay, and if it was the case that
To let you know, in terms of what we've done in the past, sorry to interrupt you. Usually we would start our voting and recommendations after the select board has approved all the articles.
Right.
This year is a little bit unique because the special town meeting has a really short timeline. So I requested that we get the draft articles as soon as they're drafted.
Right.
So that's what we got here. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but Jillian is being kind. The timing wasn't well. I would prefer to have gotten this to y'all weeks ago, but I was on vacation. That's not a good excuse, but I mean, like that's like there were some windows that were missed, and so like I asked for these articles well before they're due, so that I can get them to you and I can get them to we can kind of vet them through town council, etc. Town moderator, we like to have town moderator look at them because usually the town moderator's preference for the articles and like the order and the consent agenda, so It's kind of expedited now, so I apologize for that rush.
Right, and then I guess my procedural question, so if the sponsor of an article, in this case is like the select board, if the sponsor in particular like opposes it, does that mean it's like removed from the
Yeah.
warrant article? Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, so the general concept is the executive branch, which is the select board, submits things to be voted on by the legislative branch, which is the town meeting. Now, so that means the warrant, the thing to be voted on, as well as ballots, like when it comes to like election ballots, that's all from the executive branch, which is the select board. But however, the town charter allows for any town body, something like that, to submit an article to town meeting as long as it meets certain criteria. So, okay, so like the debt exclusion that's the example of that. So the debt exclusion for the bleachers was not an article from the select board. It came from and same with the CPC article. Like those are from non-select board entities. In this case, it makes a lot of sense that the select board sponsor a home rule petition because they're the local licensing authority anyways. And there's no real, I don't think there's like a committee that this really fits under. Like even the economic development committee is advisory to me, not to the select board. So like, anyways, this is pretty standard. These are good questions. Y'all are like kind of doing government 101 here, local government 101. I like it. So yeah, so to your point, Nikhil, like if I think I said this earlier, but again, if no matter what action y'all take on these articles, if the select board, they can't take off the debt exclusion article or the CPC article because those are submitted by other boards, but they don't have to hold a town meeting. So, yeah, I don't think they have to hold the town meeting. So they have advertised and notified the voters on the town meeting, but I think they could cancel town meeting if they wanted. They're not going to do that, but they could.
I move to recommend Control D.
A second.
All right, so we have a move and a second for Control D. Any further questions or discussion?
So sorry, who did the second? I didn't-
Nathaniel.
Nathaniel. Thank you, Nathaniel.
Okay. Any further questions or discussion on Article D? All right. Hearing none, I will take a roll call vote. Linda,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Mikhail,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Nathan,
Yes.
Nathaniel.
Yes.
I am also a yes. So that is recommended. I would say I was going to ask who might like to potentially draft these comments.
I would be happy to do that. Will we get the minutes, I guess, before that, just in case I forget anything?
Minutes.
For
Oh,
this,
you mean from this meeting today?
yes, yes. Could be helpful. for
Yep,
me.
Linda is good with them, so I'm sure that we'll
Okay,
get them.
perfect.
Yeah. And if it's helpful, I did want to let you know that the original Russell's article was passed at the 2019 ATM, which I was trying to find our recommendations from that year. I found our recommendations from when it was amended to include the address. But I don't know that I was on the committee in 2019. I think I was, but I just can't find them.
Okay, thank you.
So if that's helpful. All right.
Actually, just kind of this made me think of that, but as regards to draft control A, I guess. If you, I guess, Julian, like know of any instances where the finance committee has written a recommendation for like situations where we got sort of unexpected revenue like this. I think those could certainly be helpful. Like if you know about those, I definitely like send them my way if you have them.
Yeah, I would say every single ATM and STM will have our recommendations on the budget because it's always an article in every single meeting, basically.
Yep.
Like
So
this specific
I don't know.
situation.
Yes, so
Okay.
we with one exception because of COVID, we got revenue beyond what was originally
Okay.
projected in the state
Gotcha.
budget. So if you look at last year's special town meeting October, you should find a
Okay.
similar.
Awesome.
Yeah. And just to speak to that, so it's generally the special town meeting that does this kind of budget amendment. It's the
Yeah.
annual one that would be the spring town meeting. That's the full budget.
Good point. Yes, that is totally true. Okay. Well, let's see. And then we were just on C. No, we were on. Okay, now we're on E. And I gotta figure out how to share my screen again. So this is starting all of the, I think almost all the rest of the articles here are water sewer. The last 3, 4.
I can give you sort of like wave tops, like big picture. Because he has to
That would
pitch,
be helpful. So
he has to
next
pitch
time-
me first
and
before, yeah.
E, that's what we're on, right? Yes.
So yeah, so this is, oh yeah. So he wants to use water retained earnings. So retained earnings, I think of it similar to free cash. So if you have more revenue than expenses, you're in the black. And then that money is retained, right? So I also want to, I know this is like patronizing potentially to the finance committee, but this is not general fund money. So this is one of the 2 enterprise accounts. No, 3. We have 3 enterprise accounts: water, sewer, and ambulance. So the two water and sewer utilities, you get your water bill, you get your sewer bill, and so that has different sort of funding source, and this is relative to the water. And so the pitch from the director of public works, who's also responsible for the water utilities and sewer utilities, is pitching the use of retained earnings of $102,075 to purchase I think it's the part to back to the truck. So we bought the truck, and then this is like an interchangeable equipment on the back of the truck. And you can read the description that came from Justin, but I don't. After that, I couldn't tell you how the truck works. I mean, I know that, again, this is not the truck we own. This is like the thing that is like a modifiable repair maintenance equipment that goes on the back. So you'd have to ask him what it is exactly. But apparently this is like, interchangeable. It's really good. It's helpful to like have one truck that does multiple things.
Greg?
Yep.
I'm sorry, do we have water retained earnings? I thought the timeline for that was the same as free cash.
Peter, you asked the right question. I asked the same question because I have not seen the free cash number, and you're right, we get it at the same time. Justin checked with the town accountant to make sure that there is more than this amount of expected retained earnings, but you're right, they have not been certified yet by the Department of Revenue. So if not,
and we can appropriate it without the certification?
That is my understanding. But I'm gonna like double check all that. But that is my understanding, is you can appropriate according to retained earnings. You just, even if it's not certified yet. Like some towns do that when it comes to free cash. They appropriate the free cash in the fall. The Department of Revenue even prioritizes those towns that want to spend their free cash sooner than later. So they'll prioritize towns that have fall free cash appropriations when it comes to certification. So I'm going to double check on that, Peter. I think you asked the same question I did, because I don't expect, like, usually we do these articles in the spring.
Okay.
Do we know, I guess, or
I'm also writing these questions down for sending them ahead of our meeting, our next meeting, to Justin directly, so.
Or to me. I mean, that's a good, yeah, that's fine.
That's not really a Justin
Okay, you want me-
question.
That's a you question. Okay, that makes sense.
Kind of both of us. I mean, like,
Or it's
Justin.
a legal question.
That's fair. Municipal finance, it's like everybody, but it's a good, you're right, Peter.
Okay.
I guess my question was just, even though it hasn't been certified yet, like, do we know how much is in the water retaining earnings enterprise fund in total, or like how much is expected to be in there? Like, or I guess just the basic question of like,
Yeah.
of what proportion is that money, of that money is this $102,000 thing?
No, I know exactly. That's the right question too, Nikhil. And I don't have that information in front of me. And again, even if I did, it would come with like an asterisk that it's like an estimate. However, like, I asked my town accountant how much free cash I'm gonna have, even though I know he can't tell me certain until it's certified by Department of Revenue. But in the next couple of weeks, I'm gonna ask him, because I feed that information to the capital planning committee. And then but I tell the capital planning committee, you know, the expectation is it won't be less than X. It won't be less than $500,000. That way they can plan for that amount. And then if it's more than that, it's gravy. But the great question. Of the retained earnings for water, how much is $102,000? It's a good question.
Should we hold off on voting on this until we have that answer?
As one member, that would be my recommendation.
Can I ask why?
Well, one thing I'm looking at the annual town warrant that we had in the spring, and that at that time, the balance was 1.1 million. And we moved 500,000 out of it at annual town meeting. So I would think we have roughly 500,000. I don't know if it gets anything more in it. So we should just make sure that we have enough to cover the 102. It looks like we would, but I don't know what else came out of that.
That's very clever, Linda. I could have done that. Thank you for doing that.
But nothing more would have come out of it without us appropriating it.
Okay, yeah,
Right.
so
And
it
then-
should be roughly 500,000, but that depletes it quite a bit to 400,000.
Although,
But then
Greg,
more comes back
correct me
in,
if
right?
correct me if I'm wrong, Greg. We've designed both of the enterprise budgets to generate excess retained
right.
earnings each year.
That's right.
So we would expect it to be 500 plus some amount from this
Yeah.
year.
Bingo. So that's
Okay.
that's like proper budgeting, is if you sort of like, not to say you inflate, but you sort of like round up to make sure you have a couple percentage points over what your expected needs are in as revenue goes. Like, even free cash, the Department of Revenue recommends a certain percentage of your general fund come back as free cash every year. So but I don't want to tell you the wrong numbers, Linda. You're asking them. That's very clever of you. But I mean, these are the same questions I have. Justin can speak to the need for this transfer. Usually I don't like to count my chickens before they're hatched when it comes to free cash. So he can address the need.
And
I
can
mean-
you refresh my memory what happens with this fund? Does it roll into another fund if it's unspent, like free cash into general fund, or does it go into the revolving account? This stays here until it's appropriated,
Yeah, I think it's retained. I think
or it like stays there until it's appropriated, right? So
yeah, like we don't give the money back. So we
It-
retain.
It rolls into the following year's retained earnings. So it
Yeah.
stays within the water enterprise fund. We don't have or we're not using right now a mechanism to put it in some kind of separate reserve fund. We essentially just leave it in the budget for the enterprise fund. And, you know, Justin has said by design that
Yep.
they're trying to build that up over time so that it, you know, it can handle some capital stuff.
Well, we do devote towards a stabilization account. So, but just like free cash, we do put some into stabilization.
But that's that's not really the reserve fund we used to have. That's the reserve
Yep.
fund would be done by town meeting. The stabilization fund is done by the water and sewer commissioners,
That's what I mean.
right?
That's
Yeah, or the select board, in other words.
yeah.
Jillian, I might suggest if we're gonna ask Justin questions, is we already transferred 500,000 for, blah, 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 blah. But it was for infrastructure design beyond life cycle, blah, blah, blah. And why do we need an extra 100,000? Because wouldn't the 500,000 that we already transferred out of water retained earnings be enough? So we're needing another 100,000.
Great question.
But this is for a different purpose.
Well, this is for capital equipment, but it's what we'd spent for 500,000 was for aging infrastructure and unforeseen circumstances. So this seems like aging infrastructure, but
I thought you said it was for. Didn't you say it was for addressing the pipes? That's how I heard.
it didn't say addressing the pipes. It just said they're just, you know, they put money from that fund for unanticipated expenses
I'm not sure how
to
specific.
do aging infrastructure.
I'm
I
not
think that was into the special revolving account, wasn't it?
Let me take a look at what we did last year. I don't want to like sort of.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak to it because I'm not looking at it.
I'm unsure how much it matters in this instance. I do think these are very important questions, but depending on how specific and how held these line items are, infrastructure and equipment would be entirely different categories. So if they said infrastructure, this I believe would fall under equipment.
Yeah.
So they should be completely separate, meaning that if that 500 was spent on infrastructure, then it couldn't have been spent on equipment. But I'm not sure how hard and fast that is, or if it's just simply an appropriation from one fund to
I mean, that's what I was simplifying it to pipes, but you just said it in a much more sophisticated way than I did, Nathaniel.
Sorry, I'm a engineer by trade, so
I love it. I love it. I was just
this is my bread and butter right here. So I'm all in on this information.
yeah. So, but that was the point I was making. Are we putting something underground or are we putting something on wheels? So, this is the latter.
Well, we also did 180,000 from water retained earnings for capital equipment in the spring. So I think we should just ask. That was for a truck.
Yeah, we got, yep.
So that's like 500 plus 180. So that's 680 now, another 100. We're really depleting that account.
Potentially, but we did buy the truck. So
Yeah, we did buy the truck. Yeah, good. We'll buy
Yeah.
this hook thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Taking some notes here. So I got these questions written down so I can forward those. Are there any additional questions, discussions, or otherwise about Control E?
So I don't, just like procedurally, I guess, like, would we want then to wait until we sort of heard back about what's actually sort of in that water retained earnings account, or are we sort of okay with kind of going off the estimate that we sort of have from looking at like the past documents and stuff? Before, like, I guess, thinking about whether we want to sort of make our recommendation or not do so.
So if people feel very strongly that they have the information needed, they can always make a recommendation to recommend or not to recommend, a motion, that's the word. I would say we still have one meeting, the meeting next week, not next week, sorry, on the 9th, where Justin will be coming. The thing that is quick is taking a vote. The thing that takes a little more time is formulating our comments and reviewing those. So we don't need, how do I English? We don't need to formally recommend or not recommend in this meeting tonight to have the comments written. Does that make sense?
Yes, so
So,
it would
like,
be
if
like a
someone is
tentative
drafting-
recommendation. Or,
Yes.
okay,
So if
gotcha.
someone is drafting it, we can do, in the past, we've done things like straw polls, if someone feels very strongly one way or the other. Personally, for me, I think that I've written them both ways too, like recommend or not recommend.
Oh, wow, okay.
I didn't, I think that's a lot of extra work personally. I didn't, reading over these quickly myself before the meeting as one person, I didn't see anything that made me, as one person, as one member, be like, I have to definitely vote to not recommend these water sewer articles.
Right.
I don't know if that's helpful. I don't know if that answered the question.
No, I think you did, and that we can make a kind of a tentative recommendation or non-recommendation, and then sort of still write our comment before we sort of formally kind of go all in either way.
Okay. And then I would say maybe we can look at the other articles before we take volunteers on who wants to write the comments for this, unless we have someone who's super passionate that's going to shut me down and say, no, I absolutely need to volunteer for this right now. But I would recommend we look at all the articles here about the water and sewer and then figure out how we'd like to comment them. Or we could vote on them as a block, which is also possible. All right, I'm not hearing any dissent, so we'll move on to control number F, which is the easements. So I wanted to ask Greg, this doesn't have anything to do with the roads and other things that we voted on last time. This is like something separate in the ATM.
I think this is something different. So
Okay.
I can't remember what easements we did for
I
this.
didn't
Yeah,
think any-
this is different. This is a new one.
Okay. So we have a number of pumps that send the sewage when you flush your toilet. All that goes, down towards Powder Mill Road, and then it goes across the river towards the treatment plant. And Justin has identified that all those pumps need to get upgraded, and they're bigger and better. And so therefore we need to get access to where all those pumps are, but also specifically, we need to be able to have access to the land around it to be able to make those upgrades. And so easements are advised so that we can have access to those private properties.
And is this going to the Acton wastewater treatment?
No, it goes to ours. So coincidentally, ours and Acton's are actually like really close to each other. So on the other side of the river, right? So if you're like I want to say one of these pumps is behind, where like don't quote me on this, but I think it's behind Middlesex Savings Bank on Powder Mill. And so it all gets pumped across the river.
I had a question.
Sorry, I'm highlighting stuff and talking to myself. I'm muted. Are you gonna, it says as shown on plan entitled blah, blah, blah.
Oh, we
Is
can,
that gonna be
it's a good
something
idea.
that's- is that
Actually,
in the warrant?
we do usually do that. And I think Justin even gave me the plan and I just didn't include it in the document that I gave it to you. And
Thank
you
you.
know, usually the town moderator, he likes big maps at town meeting, so we'll probably do that anyways.
I had a question. It says that the appropriation for this is none. But then it also says that one way in which we might acquire the easements is by
Yeah.
purchasing them. And then later in the article, it says that we would be spending up to $14,300 to purchase them if we needed to. So I guess my question is just like, are we saying that this is not an appropriation because we don't know whether we'll need to spend money in order to acquire these easements? Or is this not an appropriation because we don't need to like make an appropriation in order for that $14,000 to be spent?
The latter. So, I haven't looked at the sewer budget in a while, but my reading of his comment, which I trust him, is that the budget includes money towards this particular purpose or a purpose, similar to there too, of easements or whatever the case may be. And so he can speak to how much is actually in there. But you know what? That's a good point. Town council had a similar question. So we're gonna, we might need to amend how much is set aside in, sort of identify it in that appropriation. But my understanding is it has been appropriated. So now we want to be able to get access. But we can't just like, even though we've have money set aside to pay, to pay for the ownership, for the rights. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for rights to get on private property. So we have money to pay the owners, but this says town meeting thinks, sort of blesses you to take those rights.
Is that 14,300 an upper limit? And where did it come from, I guess? Because I don't know if this is eminent domain levels, but if any of those 7 parcels decide they don't want to give up their easement rights for whatever reason, have we heard back on that in any way, shape, or form? I know from my professional experience that abutters and neighbors and concerned citizens can cause quite a problem.
Yeah.
For projects like this, especially if it's an easement or taking up.
Yep, that's a good question. So you can ask Justin for the specifics because I'm not even like an expert on how big these particular like easements are. I mean, I looked at the easement map and I didn't bring it for you guys. But good question. My guess is he did because we have the property card, so we know what the assessed value of the land is. So and then he probably calculated, or I'm sorry, in all likelihood, our contracted engineers did all this work, but they found out probably what a ratio is of that land area and the assessed value of that land area and what it might cost to be able to get whatever that square footage is. So that's probably what we do. Like generally, we offer, what you probably know this, Nathaniel. We offer fair market value, but a lot of times owners just give it at no charge because it's kind of a public need. So usually, easements come, especially of this certain we're talking small, like these pumps are not very big. So like think of like a manhole and then think a little bit bigger than that. Like this is not like, it's just not that big. But anyways, usually owners will say like, yeah, you can have access, particularly to, if we've already had access to it and we're just looking to like a marginal increase to the size of that increase, in order to be able to better pump their own sewage across the river. Usually people say it's fine.
Yeah, I guess the reason I asked is because the first part of it says that the select board and other applicable boards can take all related actions or appropriate to accomplish the purposes of the article.
No, that's fair.
But then the comments give a dollar value of 14,300. I feel like if that 14,300 is, I mean, it probably is fair market value, it should be up in the top part, which is actually relatively binding, versus the bottom part, which is just comments. But that might
Right.
just be a question to find out. Like, I mean, if these are just, 20 square feet of each parcel, I'd be shocked if it's a big deal. But like, when I hear easement, and from what I've done, it's 10 foot wide by 200 feet long. Like that's a big thing
Right.
to give up. So
That's usual easements. You're right. That's usually what we do. So you're right, but I very much appreciate that question. So I have that note and I'm gonna find out. I think you're right. I mean, inevitably we don't want to go to a town meeting. Town council did look at all these articles, and I forwarded all the notes to Justin. There wasn't many, but I do recall appropriation being one of those questions. So we'll find out.
All right. Any additional questions or comments on Control F?
Yeah, just basic definitional thing. So like an easement, that's not like reducing the lot size of like the owner. That's not like taking possession of the lot. That's like saying the town has a right to like walk down this section of your property to access municipal property.
That's it. Yep, you're right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So they can't kick us off their property.
to clarify, it can be more, it's not just access, so that easement, and it'll be legal jargon that defines exactly what it is, but like the easement means that they can build a structure on that land. So typically an easement would be if you happen to, just because it, required in some subdivision of a sewer line or a storm drain line went through the back of your property, then that means that the town or whoever was in charge of that at any point in time could come in, rip up that entire space, fix what needs to be fixed, but then they are also required to put it back to how they found it. But that kind of access can be a big deal to some homeowners. So it's not simply walking along the line, which is why I was giving some words of warning there. Like maybe some of that 7 might be particular to their rights of easements.
Yeah. They couldn't put up an iron gate so that along the easements that the town couldn't access it anymore, for instance.
No, they could not do that. No, not once the easement's in place.
Mm-hmm.
Think like right to water access almost when you have, a piece of land that you own that has, access to lakeside. You might know more about that. Maybe not. That's a common, okay, maybe my world only.
All right. I will, unless there's further discussion, flip it over to G.
So this is probably going to be provoke a lot of the same questions from Linda about the accounting for all this. So the sewer retained earnings, again, Justin is proposing using, in this case, more, 168,000, 169,000 towards modeling for the wastewater treatment plant, the sewage plant, which is across the river. So off the top of my head, I don't remember how old that plant is, but I'm sure he knows, and he's looking to make sure that it's, we know the conditions of it and plan for into the future. I'm sorry, I'm not even familiar with. I caught him last week about all these things, and our meeting was obviously brief, so I didn't catch how he came up with 168,944. That must have been the quote that we got from our water and sewer engineering firm to do that study, to do this model.
Greg, you definitely already anticipated this question, but I guess, I don't know, just to make it explicit. So we're not sure then how much is in the sewer retained earnings enterprise fund in total right now.
And not off the top of my head. Right. No, I don't.
At annual town meeting, it was 728,000, and we took 200,000 out for unanticipated expenses. So it looks like it's roughly $500,000.
There you
We
go.
should check with Justin. But he must feel he has, and more goes into it every year, so.
Yep. So yeah, I'm confident because I had asked him if he'd already checked with our town account and he said yes. So
Yeah.
I'm confident that we're not depleting it, but I don't mean to tell you how much is. Yeah.
And in our comments, we usually talk about what the balance is. So, you know, we should get that for our comments too, so people have a sense. Are we spending the last, you know, nickel, which it looks like we're not.
Okay. So I had, do we know how much is remaining? If this fund is transferred, did I miss any other questions? I had to step out for a moment to use the restroom. Nope, I'm not hearing any.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right, so that would be all of the sewer and water articles. So I have all the questions written down and I'll forward them to you, Greg, and I guess I'll CC Justin for our meeting on the 9th. Do I have any volunteers for this to write the comments? So I don't know if we want to bundle the water and sewer earnings together and maybe make the easement a separate one, or we could do them all separately. They would have to be separate recommendations, but I would say that the recommendations for E and G might be somewhat similar.
I can do those, Jillian.
All right, so you would like to do E and G?
Sure.
Okay. Do I have a volunteer for the easements?
I can do that if nobody else is dying to. Yeah, I'll do that one.
All right. Thanks to you all. Great. All right. Awesome. So I'll send those questions out and I'll get back to the committee once we get some answers. We'll have some more answers at our next meeting on the 9th. I would personally recommend we wait until we get some of these questions answered, but if someone feels strongly and wants to make a motion, that's also acceptable. If not, I would say we use the rest of our time to talk about the school article.
Jill, one last comment on the water retained earnings and the truck attachment. Would you mind asking Justin to clarify how this equipment works towards like the long-term like capital goals of increasing like water in town?
How this equipment works towards the capital goals.
Because that's part of what the water retained earnings can be used for, right? That's part of the planning process.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, all of this is a means towards an end. This is probably just more like current operations rather than future operations. But I think, I mean, I wouldn't want to invest in something that we can't use in the future. So, I don't know if this is going to, I don't think this is what you're asking, Nathan. I don't think you're asking, could this increase our water supply? No, this is a truck, but it is going to be, my understanding is it's upgrades, it modernizes us in a way that's going to be, you know, industrious in the future.
So
I guess
you're
improving and increasing like the water supply seems like one of like the most important issues for the town. And since this is like the account that's like related to that, I'm just curious if the truck could be used for like construction of those capital projects or anything like that.
I guess that's a good question. I never yeah, maybe they can. I didn't think about it like that. I mean, we have enough aging infrastructure that we, that's the other thing. Water is tough, and those water main breaks happen when you least want them to. So that's why we set aside so much money anyways, because we got old pipes.
So to sort of paraphrase your question, are you asking for him to clarify how this equipment works towards the capital water goals of the town? Is that the spirit of your question?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the clarifier. All right. Yeah, so I would propose that we move on to draft control C, which is the proposed alumni school bleacher project. So I think in terms of this bleacher project, Greg, the questions, we got a nice presentation from the school committee last week. The questions I would have for you sort of revolve around that question of the rental bleachers and their appropriateness of the code, because we've been getting a lot of different messages from different experts in the field. So like the plumber expert, the electrician expert, the new bleacher builder expert.
Yeah. Which I noticed you didn't list town administrator as an expert in building code, but because I am not, but I am also probably the one that's feeding you all these different sound bites, if you will. Well, they're all written, but either way, are you asking like my opinion? Is that what you want to know?
My main concern as one member is if you ask an expert opinion of someone you're getting a quote to build something from, they're going to say you need to build it. So I'm doing a little bit of making sure, if you're a hammer, everything is a nail.
No,
but
that's fair.
Sometimes there's screws, and I want to make sure we're not going to get screwed. So my understanding is that the track might be reaching its end of life in the next 5 years or so. So I'm sort of wondering if the bleachers and the track and the field should all be bundled as one thing later in like 5 years instead of doing just the bleachers right now.
Oh, sorry. You know what? I'm not familiar with the track actually. I would probably defer to whatever the school committee said, or even maybe that might have been a question the capital planning committee already addressed. I'm sorry. I understand your point. Like you're trying to be efficient and sort of timely with your.
Yeah, I'm trying to be efficient and timely, and I'm getting mixed messages saying that we definitely can't do long-term rentals because of XYZ code things. But if we had another end date in mind, like that supposed 5 years or something, maybe that would be permissible because you have an end date in mind. Do you know what I mean? Like,
no, that's fair. So I definitely understand your standpoint in that, and I'm a big fan of being patient, but in this case, one, the school committee already submitted it, and then two, like that, I don't think. So like in the interactions I've had with the experts, and I'm not referring to, as you pointed out, like the paid contractors for this bleachers project, right? So that's the owner's project manager, that's Colliers International, and then our designer firm. Like I'm not referring to them. I'm referring to the building inspector and the plumbing inspector. Based on, and they work for us, right? Their job is just to enforce the code. So according to my reading of their interpretation of the code, I mean, there's a reason why Rick Asman, the building inspector, said he was no longer going to certify the bleachers. So when I first got here, 6 years ago, and there was an incident at the bleachers that, and we identified that, hey, there's, even, yes, those bleachers are so old, they've been grandfathered past the current building code. Still doesn't mean it's safe having these giant gaps in people, in the back of the bleachers. because a kid literally fell out the back. Now the kid was fine, but still, like it was like, oh, well, we need to do something. And then I started this conversation of, well, if we do something in that case, we wanted to put like another piece of wood in the backing to sort of like make sure kids didn't fall through the back. Then we found out there's this thing about like threshold and compliance. So if you make improvements to a structure that's been grandfathered past building code, but if you make so much improvements to it that it surpasses what I can't remember whatever the ratio is, the threshold is, to the total cost of the project, then you are then required to either replace or bring up the entire structure up to current code. You can't, like, the state is smarter than knowing all these little towns are going to do these like little tiny incremental repairs, but then not just build the way it's supposed to be built. So they say like you can only make improvements up to a certain threshold, and then after that you have to do it the right way, like in its entirety. Like they don't want to see duct tape. They want to see it done right. So knowing that, the building commissioner said, all right, so you need to make plans. You need to do something about these bleachers. Inevitably, there's always 1,000 other demands we have on our capital needs. So bleachers were functional, and so it didn't triage to the top of the must replace right now list until the building commissioner said, I can't certify these anymore. Like now it's been years, and like his good conscience for the interpretation of the building code said he can't certify those bleachers anymore. So we shut him down because I don't want anyone sitting on bleachers that aren't certified by the building commissioner. So that was what, 2 years ago? And then since then we've been renting bleachers. And well, then we tore down the visitor side so we could put the rentals in that location. And then so if I'm using that as like a metaphor, if you will, like an anecdote into what your question is, Jill, like, can we wait? Can we be patient and then wait until the timing is right and just do alumni field, if you will? So you mentioned track, so maybe it would be the track, the bleachers, the bathrooms. I don't know. But the question would be, could we wait? I suspect that the experts would say, you can't wait. Your bleachers are shut down. Like you can't just put to be determined as to when you're going to get work done, because that just won't fly. Like you won't be compliant. And then my interpretation of what those experts have said when it came to ADA compliance, which is accessibility compliance, those are not compliant. Like the original bleachers were not. They had no bathroom facilities that were within the correct proximity, like the vicinity to the bleachers, so they were not compliant. But we were providing porta potties. But I think it was only a matter of time until we needed to replace all these, even in the best case scenario. Like we were not compliant with building code, ADA compliance, etc. So additionally, when it came to the track question, that got brought up, I think it was 2 years ago. There was a joint meeting of the school committee and the select board, and they were thinking about the scope of the project when it came to the bleachers. And the question was, what are we doing here? Are we doing a big bleacher thing? Are we making it like a Gillette Stadium? Like what are we doing when we're thinking about alumni field? And the understanding between those two bodies, the school committee and select board, was that they were going to limit project creep, was the sort of like the terminology they used. So they said, we're only doing the bleachers and whatever required facilities otherwise, right? So in this case, it's the bathrooms. But they decided they were not going to invest in a track because that was considered project creep, right? Because the idea was, is it going to be just the track, or are you going to want to do a turf field? Are you going to want to replace the basketball court? Are you going to want to replace the tennis courts? Like there was a concern at the time. And again, like even the composition of those bodies have changed somewhat. But at the time it was, nope, this is the understanding, we're doing the bleachers and the bathrooms because we're required to. So it kind of, I don't know, that's my sort of like reaction to your question, Jill, about sort of like project scale and patience and sort of like timing. That's my interpretation. regardless, the school committee feels so compelled that now is the time. So they, and I mean, there's also an argument to be said for if it is years down the road before you place the bleachers, we don't know what the cost is going to be. Even this cost has escalated in the last year, and it could go up more. So that's unfortunate, according to, like, it's out of our control, you know, market factors and otherwise. We don't know how much a project is going to cost. You only have an estimate according to your subject matter experts, you know, as like a point in time.
I just have like a pretty basic procedural question, I guess, but like on this article, it says that we were supposed to have the school committee's comments by August, I think 22nd. And certainly they're not included on this article. So like, do we have the school committee's comments, or
I do
we
not.
have? We do not.
I do not. I asked again today for them. I do not. So I even sent, this article came from the school committee. So I sent it to my treasurer collector's office, who does the bonding for the town. Like they're kind of the bank of the town, if you will. So the treasurer collector's office contacted our bond counsel. So we have town counsel, and they help us with like all our legal questions. And then when it comes to making sure we bond legally, we have a different firm for that.
Okay.
We call them bond counsel. So it's not the bank, it's like the people who make sure we're bonding. Right. Anyways, so we asked bond counsel, who usually we get the question, like we get motions from, to make sure like the legalese is correct. And they had some minor edits, like that last sentence is like an outdated line. So I sent that, but it was really just that. And so I sent that over to the school committee, and I said, like, here's bond counsel's reaction. Do you want to like alter? And I haven't heard back from that either. They confirmed receipt, but like they have not. I thought they had a school committee meeting last week too. Not sure, but I actually know. I think they did, right?
That would have been the one on the 22nd.
They did, because then it rolled into the budget subcommittee. So like there was members that were like, we waited for them to start the budget subcommittee because they had a school committee. So I don't know the results. Like I don't know if they're, but I reminded the superintendent today that I need the comments. I need any changes to their article. Again, they're not changing they're not changing the meat of the article. They're just changing the legal, like some of the legal part to it.
So it has been written basically then.
I don't know. I've not seen them. I really have not. I do not know the school comments. I do not know. I have not written them.
But I mean, I guess my question was, like it's been written like by them, but they just have to make edits, is what you're saying.
That's my
Okay.
expectation. That's my expectation. They're probably just like you, where like they had to kind of, amongst the five of them, they had to deliberate and then designate one of them to write it, or tell the superintendent to write it. I don't know. Like I write the comments for the select board, and then they give me some feedback sometimes, but like I don't know how they do it over there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I have a question, Greg. So we've been given like kind of estimates on what it would be to rent compliant bleachers, over the long term. But the bathroom was really what threw it, is no, we can't have just bleachers. We have to have a working bathroom as well. But it's not really a full bathroom. We need like a wash station and a drinking fountain, I think, were the main components. Is that like, do we know the cost difference between like doing the sewage and a full blown bathroom versus just having a wash station and fountain and renting, over long term? Because it's not a full bathroom. That's, I think, that didn't come back on the emails at least.
But I think I understand your question. So let me sort of break it down. So if you're gonna do new bleachers, then which are gonna be current code compliant, then code compliance requires bathrooms, not porta potties. Bathrooms.
Right. But if we do rentals.
No, so if you're renting bleachers, you may, but I'm not confident in that. If you're renting bleachers, you may be able to rent porta potties, because that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
But if you're building bleachers, you can't just do porta potties. Because you're building code compliant bleachers, you have to do code compliance plumbing. And then, so now we go over to, I think, the other part of your question, like, what is code compliance when it comes to the bathrooms? I'm not the expert in that. My understanding is our experts minimize the scale of their, because we even had multiple discussions about like how many toilets do you have to do, like what size is of the building is it, you know, like we literally at a select board meeting we got into like the detail of like how many toilets. And so my understanding is the design of the bathroom facilities aligns directly with the amount of seats. Like even this $3.4 million is like the lower estimate of, like, I don't remember the numbers. Let's just say one project design could have been 900 seats. And then
Right.
school committee was like, well, maybe we don't need 900, let's do 750. So that number was 3 point something higher than 3.4, and now it's 3.4 because that was 750 seats worth. But again, I think y'all know this. The majority of that 3.4 is not so much to the steel structure that is bleachers. Like, it's not cheap, but I'm just saying that's not the bulk of the cost. It's this, you're building a new building and you're putting, like you said, sewer line, water line, electricity, like you're building a building. And so, and plus the access and like the paths and pedestrian access and everything. So, that's my understanding is.
But if we decide not to build and we say the town says, no, we don't want to pay that, we just want rentals, can we get away with, and not that I'm for this, but like if we have a porta potty that has just a water line and has just a working hand station, because that's what it sounded like from the email. And I've been in those porta potties, you know, just where you wash your hands in it.
Oh,
because it has
yeah.
running water. And you have like a water fountain outside. So say we do the rentals and you have a porta potty, just it has water access, not sewage access, but water access.
That's probably, no, actually, I don't want to say, oh no, wait a second. Again, Greg Johnson, town administrator, not ADA expert, not engineer. I have a liberal arts degree. Okay, so this is
I might be able to speak to this better than
Thank you.
I've done a lot of code review in my past. I didn't really want to jump on it too hard in the previous meeting because I was brand new, but the idea that you couldn't rent a porta potty that would be to code for a long period of time sounded absolutely bonkers to me. So yes, Katie, I can speak pretty emphatically that if we wanted to put a porta potty down and we installed the appropriate hand washing and drinking water stations, there would be a way to make that to code. What that would cost and the process to get there, I can't speak to. I haven't seen any of the engineer drawings,
Right.
plans.
Right.
I have no idea what's to code or compliant and what's not. But as for allowable, 100%, it is possible.
Okay. Because we haven't seen any of those numbers for, like, we've done projections on the rentals versus building, but not, and then now, oh, we can't rent because we have to build a bathroom. But really, if let's say just getting a water line in there and having the porta potty and renting bleachers was still over the next 10, 20 years cheaper than the 3.4 million. And it probably wouldn't be, but you know, that comparison we haven't seen, I feel, if that makes any sense.
It does, and that's actually my big issue here too, is that I like this project. I think it's a good project. I mean, I can walk there in about 60 seconds and see the space, and I'd like to see it improved, but as a fiscally responsible person, or at least trying to be, like, I would want to know what the other side of the equation is before I would vote for something like this personally. 3.4 million, I know that when it comes down and we crunch the numbers, Nathan's spreadsheet says it will hit us by, you know, X% on our debt service, blah, blah, blah. But where that falls compared to a rental, I'd like to see the rental numbers. I don't think the school committee really put that effort in on the other side, and probably because of all the history that Greg was talking about there. This has been going on for a long time, and that there's a lot of essentially handshake agreements between a lot of different individuals that it should be done, but that does not necessarily take into account the fiscal responsibility of the town of either combining projects or of checking if, you know, can we get nice rental porta potties for the long term, and, you know, good bleachers that have a backing to them so kids don't fall through. And would that cost be less than the debt service cost? And if so, then, you know, running that until we do an entire alumni field renovation for $10 million or whatever that would cost at the time, and yes, it would probably go up, might make more sense fiscally, but that's just my own opinion on that one, so.
There's bigger budgetary calculations as well. So they're asking for a debt exclusion, which is above 2.5% prop. So above that's what this article says too, but it's above the 2.5 plus new growth. So they're looking not to burden our regular operating budget when it comes to paying off the debt through the bonds for this project. But what you're referring to is renting. So if you want to rent the bleachers and therefore you need to rent the porta potties, because you can't build the new bleachers and rent porta potties. Okay. So if you're going to rent all of it for the foreseeable, you don't know, 5 years, who knows, but that's all operating costs. And so now you're talking, like, I think the original estimate, don't quote me on this, but it was like $58,000 a year for altogether for the rentals, both the bleachers and the bathrooms.
Yeah.
Again, like I can't even like say whether those are all fully ADA compliant. Like I think you could.
We were told that they weren't, that those costs were not accurate and that they should be
There
higher
you go.
to hit the appropriate rental requirements, to hit ADA and whatever other maybe plumbing, porta potties, etc. So those numbers would be.
So right, so either way, whatever the cost is, it's at least 57. It's probably higher, as you said. Then now that's operating costs. So that is less regular operating costs, funding that I have towards whatever other community needs we have. And the school committee has been saying very much more and more recently that they are advocating for an increase over their sort of regular increase every year for the budget. They have used the term override. So they would probably do the calculus of, if they ask for an operation expense, which is the rentals, that hurts how much they may need for their current school operations if they were to ask for an override. Like it's kind of a balance. I don't know if I'm saying that clearly at all, but I'm trying to I'm trying to anticipate the future politics here. So if I think if they're, again, whatever they told you last week or the week before, like go by whatever they said. I'm just thinking long-term, they probably think it's better to do this investment for this project and not hurt their other operations.
I mean, tell me if I'm like totally. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, they also talked about potential revenue that the new bleachers could bring in because we could, right? I mean, I don't think that was a big source of.
Yeah, it wouldn't offset this, but I mean, like, it would be something. You're right. It would be something.
Why? Tell me if I'm like really far off the mark here, but like, why wouldn't it be better to have an operational override as opposed to like taking on new debt at this point? I mean, when and the number that I keep thinking about is like our debt service, like percentage of our budget. And it's, between 10 and 11% right now, which puts us in like the top 5% of towns in Massachusetts. I don't want to add any more to that debt burden, like unless there's a really good reason. And I mean, there's good reasons why we got here in the first place. But having operation override actually pushes that down a little bit. And that's ongoing money that we can count on for the future going forward.
That's fair. That's fair. You make a strong point. Like I guess the argument, I'm just playing devil's advocate for y'all. So like the other side of it is, there's no hard rule. So yes, it would put us in I trust you. That probably would put us high. When it came, and maybe in the top 5% of the Commonwealth when it came to like debt. You're probably right. But you don't get penalized for that. It just yes, yes, it would become reflective in like our credit rating. They would probably say like, well, your debt's a little high. And they would say, yeah, but we're paying for it. And I don't think it would impact our credit rating that much. Like we've been the same credit rating for years. And every time I try to improve it, I can't figure out how to crack that nut to get it higher. So and then the other argument is just need. Like it's 10,500 people in a, very small square mileage of space, and we're not regionalized, and we just have needs, and we're trying to modernize our facilities. So if this is what the people want, I'm not saying that it's kind of subjective is what I guess what I'm trying to say. It's like, it's like there's no like hard rule that it's just like, this is what people want. But not everybody. I mean, like, as was noted, the select board had a 3-2 vote in favor, but they needed a 4th vote to pass it to be on to the presidential ballot. So if this passes at town meeting on October 7th, then we have to schedule an election. And I've asked the town clerk when that would be, and we're figuring that out.
Just kind of going off that exact point, actually. I guess like, could there be an instance where if the town like votes to pass this warrant article in October, but then they like don't vote to extend, they don't vote to exempt from the limitation on total taxes. So I guess, would that mean that this has to be paid for through borrowing?
No, so it requires both legislative actions to be able to do any override, and there's 3 types of override. A debt exclusion is a type of override.
Okay.
And the two legislative actions are, as you said, town meeting and an election. So you have to pass both. And the order doesn't matter too much. Some towns do one and then the other. I have learned generally it's helpful to do the town meeting and then the election, because usually people understand what they're voting for. But you have to pass both.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. So yeah, so as you too, Greg, I did not yet get the sponsor comments for this article. So I think I, as one person, like to see the sponsor comments before voting on an article, and I do also want to make sure that the legal language, or otherwise the body of the warrant, it's the article itself is finalized, because I also haven't gotten clarity on that either. It sounded like you hadn't either, Greg.
That's right.
Okay, so I'm not entirely sure that the wording in this paragraph is 100% finalized yet. So I'm not sure. I think we got a lot of information about this, but I would like to see those 2 things before I personally am comfortable voting on this. But other members might have different. So we'll still have the meeting on the 9th. To do this, and we can draft recommendations, although I think this one might be a little trickier. Because I think a couple different boards in the town have been split on it. But I will reach out to make sure that the article itself is finalized, and that I'll ask them to provide the sponsor comments. I don't know. The other thing that I heard from our discussion is that we would really like to have a quote or some kind of a comparison between renting ADA compliant bathroom and bleachers. I'm not sure that's something that can be done. I think that's out of scope of the current, what do they call them? The OPM, the building manager for the new project. I don't think they would quote that for us. I think we would have to figure that out ourselves, right?
I mean, they probably wouldn't want to, because we're not paying them to tell us how much it costs to rent bleachers. But they
right.
They may. But I wasn't asking them. When I was getting that information, I was asking Mike Aria. He's the athletic director. So Mike works for the superintendent, and his job is to run a successful athletics program, which the bleachers support. So he's the one who provided information about what it would cost, the expected costs for next year's rentals. And so if you want, you can ask me anything and I'll just forward it to whoever. But if you have that particular question about sort of like projected rental costs, if you ask me, but you can always ask Brian Haas and he can forward it to Mike Aria or whoever, and we can get that answer for you.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments that I missed from the committee tonight? Oh, the other question, if we do hold that 90-day post STM meeting, I think you gave me a couple quotes about it. It sounded it'd be something like $5,000 to $10,000 roughly
Yeah,
for that special it's not a, that's what it's called, right? A special election or a special
special
ballot?
election. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Special election. Yep. Okay, because we did not budget for it.
Okay.
Yep.
Do we have any other questions for Greg on this topic?
So just to clarify, like one point that I thought I heard from you earlier, Greg, we're currently renting, and the rentals we have, we didn't have to like pull a building permit. It's not forcing the town to bring things up to like the current ADA code. The old bleachers that are blocked off cannot be used. They fail. They're not in compliance. But it sounds like we're not currently doing anything illegal, or whatever the appropriate term is, by renting bleachers and bathrooms. Is that?
So, David, you're asked the $100 million question. I mean, it sounds like Jillian was forwarding to y'all all the same information I was getting. That's still not 100% clear to me, even today. But that tells me to be skeptical that we are in compliance. Like, unless I'm told that we are in compliance, then I would be prepared for the worst case scenario, that we're
Yeah,
not.
I would agree. I mean, honestly, reading Phil Palumbo's email is just that the setup that we currently have is not code compliant, is incredibly direct, and Colliers as a consultant wouldn't state that unless they're completely
Right.
sure. And they talked with the people, Maynard Public Inspector, who would do that. You know, this is okay. So I would assume that something has to change within the next year. Would probably be a good assumption.
Yeah,
What that is, though, is the question.
Yeah, that's I concur as well. But maybe, as y'all were talking about, and Katie was like describing, like maybe it's a different type of porta potty. I'm just saying, but like maybe it's a different type of facility. Like you can get really nice. Like when we used to host town meeting outside, we used to rent these really nice ones that were, and y'all have seen them. Like you go to like really nice concerts or like wherever, and there's like almost like trailer size ones where you walk in and there's like a bathroom really. But I mean, that's even more expensive, right? So I don't know if that's what the school committee would, yeah, because the school committee has their own interests, right? So if they have their own constituents, and so I don't know if they would be interested in checking a box. I think my sort of interpretation of them submitting that article is that they're looking to do things. They want the project the way they want it.
Right. And I'm not sure if it's worth asking for getting a quote for rental ADA compliant situation when I personally don't have clarity that that thing is possible. You know, like I know that there's not necessarily interest from the school, but is getting a quote for this rental, we can always ask. But the impression I'm getting is that it's not possible to be compliant with code and rent. So I think the question the committee has, is that true? Is that what I'm hearing tonight? Like you want me to reach out one more time and ask to get an updated quote for this potentially ADA compliant situation for rentals?
I feel like I've been the driver of this one, and while I would love to have that information, we're not going to get it in time. And you're right, they're not interested in that. They definitely have a pathway that they have chosen. So, I mean, if someone else would like that, then sure, I guess they could speak up and you could do it. But I was more leaning towards voicing my opinions and asking for an actual answer there. I don't actually expect anything.
I think that we have every right to ask, and that is part of our responsibility, is to explore all the avenues. I guess I'm just also trying to be realistic that I'm not sure that we have a good source, like you're saying, that we could understand this in the 2 weeks or whatever that our comments are doing. But I'll ask. I want to make sure I'm asking the correct isn't the right word. I'm conveying the spirit of the ask appropriately.
I mean, y'all represent town meeting, so it might get asked at town meeting anyway, so you can ask the question up front.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to,
I like questions up front, so for what it's worth.
yeah, I guess I want to know what a no vote would mean. Like, we would have to do something. Like, what would that look like? What would the cost of that be?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think the questions that I certainly, just as one person, would want to have answered before voting on this is and this is maybe already been touched on, but just like, is spending, this very large sum of money and doing what the school committee suggests, is this the only way that we can be in compliance with the code and the ADA and whatever else we need to be in compliance with? And then I guess the second question that I would want to know is and Nathaniel mentioned this actually as well, but just like, how much does it cost to do the renting and everything else? Just sort of the numbers. And I think that's very much a distinct question from just like, because obviously we have to be in compliance, like we can't like not be in compliance, right? So I think maybe that first question is maybe the sort of the leading question, but also just like being able to know both of those. I think I would certainly want to know that before I make my, educate vote and whatnot.
Okay. So I will ask, if this article, i.e. debt exclusion, the only way we can be in compliance with code, is it possible to rent code compliant items, bleachers / potties? We feel that a comparison to a rental compliance situation would be a good thing to see. This would also help us understand what the cost of a no vote would look like. For example, the cost of renting for shorter term solutions. I can English that a little better, but if I missed anything, let me know.
I would add that as Greg keeps pointing out, that if we rent, there is site work that needs to be done. So I would say that rental plus maybe minor site work. Just because, to be clear, that we understand that you cannot rent without any other work associated. You have to do something. We just want to know what as Nathan said, what the no cost could be. Even just ballpark. Is it 50, 100, 400?
Okay. Okay. Do we have any other comments, discussions, or questions on draft control Article C? Okay. Great. So I think that's very helpful. I did have an additional question for you, Greg. So you sent me an email earlier today about a potential COA article.
Oh, yeah.
About changing how the Council of Aging situation works. So I did want to bring that up. Yeah.
You want to get the 401? Okay, so months ago, I got asked by Council on Aging Chair Marianne Shields if just what the process is, if they wanted to look at what the bylaws, how they describe the Council on Aging, the composition and the authority. So I said, great question. Go talk to the bylaw review committee. So she did, and talked to Bill Coleman with the bylaw review committee, and they developed like what this concept of what they wanted for. It's not just the membership, which right now is 5, and I believe Marianne was interested in increasing it to 7. But that was one part of it, and then the other part was whatever the authority is defined for the Council on Aging. So, they worked. She collaborated with bylaw review committee. They sent that draft to town council, and then they got it back. But then, in the meanwhile, over the summer, Marianne went out of the country, and she just came back. And when she came back, she called me and apologized profusely for not getting me the draft article in time for my deadline. And I said, well, like, you might have missed the boat. So I can't guarantee anything. She also noted that the Council on Aging themselves had not yet endorsed the final version of whatever this draft article is. So that meeting is this Thursday. The Council on Aging meets on Thursday, August 29th. So I told Marianne as nicely as I could, I can't guarantee anything. One, I can't guarantee that I'll recommend to the select board to put it on the warrant. Now they could anyways. They can submit anything they don't have to go through me to talk to the select board. But I get paid to advise the select board, and I would say probably whether I think something is a good idea or not. I'm not saying what Marianne is trying to do is not valuable or virtuous. I think it is. She probably has correctly identified some shortcomings or some vulnerabilities of the Council on Aging she's probably trying to address. I think that's probably true. But does it need to be on the fall town meeting? I don't know. So when I brought that up to the select board, so at the select board, no, actually at the select board, I didn't even have that much confidence that I was going to be able to see even a draft. So that was at last week's select board meeting. So yeah, so I don't know what you're gonna see. I didn't try to sugarcoat it with Marianne. I just said you can get this Council on Aging to vote something in, but I don't know if the select board's gonna want to add anything at this point, because I'd already briefed the select board on all those articles you just discussed. So the select board hadn't seen the final, but they know it all. It's coming. And they've seen the same draft you just saw. We just went over today. That's what the select board has seen as well. And to your point, they have nothing on the Council on Aging. So I don't have a lot of confidence that the select board is going to sort of recognize an urgency. Maybe they will. I mean, I'll leave that window open to Marianne and the rest of the Council on Aging. Maybe there's an urgency to making changes to the bylaw. But I don't know.
Okay. And is there, before I jump to a different topic, does anyone have questions on that topic?
Just a question, Greg. Isn't the Council on Aging a town, whatever the charter says, an entity that could submit a warrant article without the select board?
Maybe I'd have to check the legality of it. I think you're right. Like, I think that, oh, what you're saying is even if they submitted to the select board and the select board says no, I'd have to check. I'd have to check with I don't remember what the 3 or whatever it is criteria. I think one of them is if it's an expense, it has to identify the funding source and the approximate like expense amount. It has to be legally, no. I'm trying to remember what the criteria is, but yeah, I think you're right, Peter. If it meets those criteria, it could still be included in the warrant, but I don't remember the criteria.
But then there is a deadline that it has to be a certain amount of time.
Yes.
Before the town meeting.
Right. Either way, I was trying to tell Marianne that like there's sort of like political capital I don't think she wanted to spend to try to rush a bylaw amendment.
Okay.
I was trying to be nice about it, but I hope she, I don't know what's going on with the Council on Aging that she felt so compelled. I can't speak to it.
Okay.
I'm the liaison to the COA, so I've been attending their meet. Unfortunately, they don't meet in the summer, which is an issue because there's so much stuff going on, and they now have 5 members, And with all the things going on with this, the UMass study and the senior center, they have a real trouble getting subcommittees, because the minute they can only have 2 on any kind of a working group. Other than that, they get a quorum issue. So they wanted to have 7 so that they could get, because they have so much work to do, they needed to parse it out. So 7 was a much better number. And then we've been looking at, of course, going around to all the other towns. Most other towns have much bigger COAs that gets them to do a lot more things to support all the activities that they want to do. So they're finding so they had a lot of good reasons, unfortunately, and they had worked on the draft. So unfortunately, I think over the summer, the deadlines come faster than you think. So I think it is they have a lot of good reasons to increase the number by 2.
Sure.
But too bad they might have missed the ball till the spring, because they could use the extra help.
I mean, it'd be one thing if it was just the membership. I don't think my board would be like, or the town meeting in general, as Peter's point, like if it goes to town meeting, my suspicion is town meeting would probably be okay with just adding 2 members of the Council on Aging. But Marianne that was only one side of it. Marianne was also trying to balance it with some authority sort of definition. And I'm not sure.
All right. Okay. Thanks for that update. Much appreciated. Great. And there's no stormwater enterprise fund that I saw in these potential ones. So maybe that'll be later meeting.
Yeah, maybe, but that's even a greater reach stretch. Yeah,
That's the impression I got from the select board meeting. The last one, so.
That's a lot to swallow. So I don't know. No stormwater,
Okay.
pun intended, but and then not to say it's not very important. Like stormwater is like it's an issue, but oh, it's not stormwater, by the way. I apologize. There is a potential for stormwater enterprise, which we are conducting work on right now. It's trash and recycling is the enterprise. So
Oh, sorry, I'm mixing stuff up.
no, I'm also confused because there's a potential for 2 new enterprises in the future. But the one we're talking about, which you're referring to, is Justin DeMarco had mentioned the development, working with the Trash and Recycling Task Force on a trash and recycling enterprise. So yeah, that's what it's about. But again, I haven't seen it. So and I don't know if the task force has I don't know if they've sort of endorsed it yet. So if the select board, I mean, that's a big ask to start a whole new enterprise.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I think that's all the STM articles I am aware of.
Me too.
Okay. Yeah, the only other thing I wanted to touch base with you briefly on was the 40B application that you forwarded. I don't know if there's anything we need to be aware of there, but it's for a lot of units, and I'm sure we don't necessarily have water capacity for it, but how would that work?
Yeah. So let me give you guys like the breakdown. So months ago, we got approached by 2 different developers. And one of them was this developer, Avalon. They're popular. Like, I don't know if they're statewide or regional, but Avalon, they build houses. So they kind of met with town staff, like as a courtesy, they met with town staff, and I had identified what town staff refers to as the cutting property. So it's down Parker Street and then past the Market Basket, like past Manor Crossing. I think it's past Bose Hill even, but it's on the left. So it's on the border with Sudbury. And so there's property out there. And I think they had acquired this land. And so this developer, Avalon, wanted to build hundreds of units. I think it's like 200 units. So a portion of those units, they do want it to be affordable. So then Massachusetts Chapter Law 40B pertains. And that sort of gets into whether the town subsidized housing index, SHI, whether that's above 10% or below 10% according to the overall housing stock. So if your overall housing stock in a municipality, if 10% of that housing stock is above, I'm sorry, if 10%, if you're above 10%, then you're considered safe harbor, meaning a developer can't come in and sort of force a housing development on you. They're not there. It's not to say they can't, it's not like they're going to have to build according to code and compliance and whatnot, but they go around a lot of the local permitting if you're not in safe harbor. And so right now we are not at 10%. So, but there's other ways you can be in safe harbor. So you're generally safe if you have over 10% of your housing stock as affordable, but there's other ways, like if you complete a housing production plan, then that means you're making an effort towards increasing towards your goal of increasing your subsidized housing index, or if you add more housing in. So the select board just approved a 40B, like project for 115 Main Street across from Boston Bean. And so, because that is including some residential, which is going to include some affordable. So if that's approved by the state, then even though that still may not get above us, I don't think it's still going to get us above 10%. But it shows that the town is making like a dedicated effort. And so the state, I think, will give you a year, maybe 2 years, to extend your safe harbor, sort of your criteria. So then, anyways, so when Avalon came and they said, we want to build this, and we said, well, like y'all just mentioned, we don't think we have the water for you. So like generally town staff doesn't say yes or no to growth. Our job is to provide, here's the criteria, here's the regulations, here's the facts. And so the facts were and that Justin DeMarco said he doesn't have the water for 200 new units of housing. And so, but I guess they didn't believe us. I don't know, but they submitted their application for a 40B housing to the state towards it's called the Massachusetts Housing Partnership. And they fall under the Executive Office for Housing and Livable Communities. And then they will determine whether that application is complete or not. And that's where it sits right now. So the application is sitting with the Massachusetts Housing Partnership. We got a courtesy copy, which maybe that's what I sent you, Jill, but we got a courtesy copy. They didn't have to do that because they're going around the town because they don't recognize our safe harbor. Now there are also, there's also an argument in town that we meet this other criteria for safe harbor, in that the ratio of I want to say it's like our square footage of housing stock is above a certain percentage according to our density and our geographic scale. But that argument was made like 10 years ago when we were considering Maynard Crossing, and town staff looked back into it and the regulations have changed. And I don't have confidence as of today that we would meet that criteria. But the problem is, if the town were to deny an application based on that criteria, we have to then prove it, and that costs money. So when we were considering that argument against Powder Mill Apartments, so 6 years ago when I started, there was an application on my desk for Powder Mill Apartments, which is across the street from Wendy's. And the argument was then that we don't have to entertain this application because of this geographic sort of ratio that we don't need, that we're in safe harbor according to this thing. Town council said you could deny it based on that, but then the state is going to require you to hire a third party to prove it. And at that time, my recollection was that was going to cost between $10,000 and $20,000 to pay a consultant to do the geographical survey to find out whether we really are. And if that didn't work, then we're out that money, and the state's going to force it. Now, in that particular project, you all know it is being built across from Wendy's, but it's being built entirely on the Acton side. So But to go back to this thing about cutting, if and when we get notice from the state, the Massachusetts Housing Partnership, that they have accepted this application from Avalon, then we have to reply, and we will probably reply with potentially an extension to our like formal response and or a denial of rejection. And my understanding is based on, if nothing else, water. So even if we wanted this 200 units, but I'm not saying we are, I don't see how we could physically provide that water, because based on all the analysis I've seen, we can't. But my guess is the lawyers that work for Avalon are doing their job if they can get the state to force us to permit that. So if the state says, yeah, you don't have the water today, but you may have it in the future, so you have to give them all the permits because you haven't hit your SHI, your subsidized housing index, you're not in safe harbor, then those lawyers have served their clients well. They get permits, and that sits there until we build the water, which we're talking about doing. Like, we want to build the water, like we want to increase our water capacity. So it just sits there. Same thing happened with that Powder Mill Place apartments across from Wendy's. The town of Acton approved their permits, but they couldn't build because their wastewater treatment plant was not capable. And 6 years later, they increased their capacity of the wastewater treatment plant, and now they're building.
Does that mean that they would be quote unquote first in line or whatever point for development to, like, you know, let's say we have water capacity for 300.
Yeah.
And the town has someone that, you know, we would like to give to some developer that has a better project for 300. If these guys get it approved, then they take 200 of that 300, and then there's only 100 left. I mean, I'm making up numbers here, but
I don't know. That's a great question, Nathan. It's an excellent question.
A second thing is, if there wasn't a water concern right now, would the town have said yes?
I can't say that because I'm not the policymaker. So
I guess in your opinion.
In Greg Johnson's opinion,
In Greg Johnson's opinion, not to put you on the spot, but in Greg Johnson.
Greg Johnson's opinion, I would say no. I don't think that's a good location down a cutting property. It's like behind a neighborhood. So you'd have to, I don't even know. My staff who's been there actually drove into Sudbury to get there. So I think the location is the location that the town already approved up on Powder Mill Place, the Powder Mill overlay district. Like we got the MBTA adjacent zoning compliance because we drew an overlay, like we drew the 40B compliance around 111 Powder Mill Road. So that same Wendy's I'm talking about, if you go up along the driveway, you know, between the Wendy's and the storage units, there's that old Stratus Industrial. At the annual town meeting, Chris Arsenault, the chair of the planning board, gave a very good convincing argument for making that to be our designated area to be MBTA compliant. So that's where I would want people to go, because that's where the town said they were comfortable with people going. Like that's where I would want to go. But even then, we don't have the water. But still, like, if that's, like, we've been trying to focus to rebalance sort of like the economics of the town, we've been trying to focus on Powder Mill, not down Park. I don't think I'm a policy advisor. I think to balance the economy, it should be where we've been focusing all these years, which is Powder Mill.
My question is, just looking at Steve Silverstein's email, which I guess we got forwarded.
Yep.
If the Mass Housing Partnership issues the project eligibility letter, then I guess Avalon still has to have it like approved by our zoning board of appeals. But then it also said in that email, I guess, that like any adverse decision that the zoning board of appeals made for that Avalon permit or whatever, like there's this like housing appeals committee that can like overturn that apparently. So I guess my question is, like, do we actually have the ability to issue a denial? And either way, like, what would that actually look like?
No, that's great questions. We're going to cross that bridge in the near future, but I would my guess is, Greg Johnson's guess is, we don't have a strong argument because again, the Commonwealth is trying to build affordable housing. Like they've been doing it for decades, and particularly really increased it under the Baker administration with the MBTA zoning like law, and then the Healy administration doubled down and they created a whole new agency like devoted towards housing. So my guess is if our ZBA, the Zoning Board of Appeals, said no, to your point, it would probably go back to the state and they'd be like, no, you haven't come up with a good reason. You just don't want them to. Like, that's not going to fly. But again, like the state deals with like 351 municipalities. So if like the state says like, unless you have a really damn good reason why you can't allow this, like water, then the state's objective is to increase affordability for the Commonwealth. We want people to stay in Massachusetts and not move out of the state. So the only way you can do that is if you kind of force people to do, like all these towns are like, yeah, it's great to build that in the other town. But if everybody says build it in the other town, then no one's town is increasing affordability.
Right.
So that the state says, like they did with the MBTA zoning law, they're like, no, we were serious. Here's the stick. You're doing it now. I meant stick and carrot. Like they had a stick and carrot. The carrot was you get grants towards helping you towards your goals. So that's another thing. If we, the state would say, no, you're not denying this 200 units, even though it's going in a place you may not want it to, but we'll help you out. Like now you're eligible for all these other grants, but even if we don't want it. Yeah, as far as like my concern is like I'm the business of the town, so I like my bottom line going up because of like increased property taxes. But I don't, or even sales tax, because all these people are going to be shopping. But if you ask Brian Haas, the superintendent of schools, like if I couldn't answer for him whether he thinks the schools can take on the capacity of whatever 200 units worth of potential new children is. Like the state does, you can work out those formulae. You can say like, okay, it's 200 units. That means this many bedrooms, which means approximately this many like projected children. But you can do all those scenario planning, but I couldn't answer for those. Yeah.
I probably should stop asking questions. I feel like I've added a lot of time this meeting, but so this one's gonna bug me. What's the last project that Maynard has approved of like a large unit increase? Do you have an idea of what that number was? Is it 50, 100? Is 200
The
a
last
big project?
The last big one was probably down on Maynard Crossing, right? So if you look
Right.
beyond, if you
How
look
many units is
Market
that?
Basket, that's a lot. I don't know. It was like 150, 200 units. That's a lot.
Okay, so similar size. Just curious.
But in that particular case, I mean, like that was like those of you who have been working with and for the town for a lot longer than I have know that was a long, like that took a long time. That was many, many meetings, many, many long deliberations. And the state helped us out with that because the state gave us a MassWorks grant to increase our sewer capacity. Like in order to like handle the load onto our sewers and our pipes, we had to increase the capacity of our pipes from one end of town all the way down to Powder Mill. So the state helps us out with that.
Okay, great. There's so many mute buttons. I'm just going to keep talking while I'm muted. Okay, so I think for me, I want to be also sensitive about how late it is. So I think that was all of the topics that were at the forefront of my mind for tonight. For Greg, are there any additional questions or comments for Greg tonight? All right, so I will send out the questions that I gathered to you, and I guess I'll CC Justin too. And I'll get those out after the meeting. So thanks so much for answering all our questions. Much appreciated.
No, it's good. Thank you so much. You put me on the spot a couple times. Appreciate it. And And good, it was a good team. Y'all have a good balance. So I'll let you go with that. Thank you so much for your time. And let me know if you have any questions about anything.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Thanks, night.
Greg.
Bye, guys.
All right, so I think I will also, I would like to also move on to some of our next topics. So Nathan did provide us a draft of comments for the CPC article, so thanks for that. I don't know if we want to go over those tonight or we'll go over all the comments next week. I can send out this document to the committee. I would say, let me see. So they're quite nice comments. We did get information about the balances of the different funds from the CPC directly. I would say my understanding though of these funds is that this would be what would be left if the article passed. So
What? You are correct.
I think this might be next week. So, so the way that it's currently written is saying that it would come out of, but this would be if it was passed. So I think it needs to be tweaked just a tiny bit. So, but this is like, I can send this out. I would motion, since it's almost 10, that, or recommend that I sort of send this out with all my notes and comments in here and sort of who's writing each part. And we can use this to directly write our comments and talk about them next time. So the thing is, if you have your comments, you have to send them directly back just to me. Because if you send them to the whole committee and then people start sending their comments back to the whole committee, then that violates open meeting law. Does that make sense with words?
It makes sense, but why?
So I'll
You know
compile.
what? Don't answer that.
Okay,
We'll
thanks. So I'll compile everything and I'll send them out to everyone ahead of our meeting on September 9th. So I'll send these out to everyone after the meeting. So I'll just stop sharing. So I think the only other thing on our agenda tonight is approving minutes of the 19th. I can pull that up. So these are our minutes from our last meeting. So this is when the schools came. So these are all of the comments about the school article.
My name is spelled wrong. I'm just saying, very important feature here. Keep going. Oh, there you go.
I think I probably hit a
Sorry.
button while I had these open.
No, it's fine.
Okay, so this is very nice summary of this article. Since nobody volunteered to write these comments, if that's helpful, I can write those comments. Unless someone else feels strongly and wants to write comments.
For
Recommendation
for the bleacher.
for the bleachers. Yeah.
I mean, I was gonna volunteer, but I don't feel super strongly. I was thinking of just writing, you know, some of like the pros and cons, because I don't get the sense that anybody on the committee is like 1000% super enthusiastic. Yes. But, and I don't know, it seems like we all have like some reservations to a greater or lesser degree. Is that kind of where people are at? I'm not saying like no. I'm not saying that we'd be voting no. Just it doesn't make sense to kind of present some of the issues, even if we are like voting to pass it.
I think that could be helpful. So if you'd like to write that up, I think that would be super helpful. What we've done in the past for articles that are challenging is we've sort of written them live together, but it helps when we have something like a straw man recommendations to sort of pull apart and add to live. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking we do.
Okay. So I would,
Well,
I would greatly appreciate if you're passionate about that. Go ahead, Peter.
But I also agree with Nathan that, I don't know, anyway, I'm personally fairly conflicted about this article. And,
Yeah.
you know, just because we vote to recommend one way or another doesn't mean we shouldn't present a kind of full airing of what we see as issues. So, you know, you can, just because, you know, I think you can write it the way you're talking about it. And it still would be very useful. We should probably include most of that, even if we vote, you know, yes, and we want to include negative, or if we vote no, we want to include reasons we should have voted yes.
Procedural question also, and to add something to that as well. When it says FinCom recommendation, is that just simply a yes or no on the actual ballot?
Yes.
On the
Okay.
actual ballot, it'll say, yeah, it'll say FinCom, how they've done it historically is recommends. And then if they say no, it says does not recommend.
It's essentially as a majority, that's, as you were saying, Peter, earlier, that as a group, our vote will go in that direction. But I definitely would third that concept that I am also very conflicted, and I think that in this instance, talking about both as if we actually had, unless someone is very strongly one way or another, had a tie on that, making it shown in that way would be probably beneficial to the voters to understand both sides of the issue in equal capacity, because I see both sides at this point pretty heavily.
Yep, and I would say that for articles that we've been conflicted about in the past, that's how we've done it. We've that have been close like that we've written like the fours, the yays and the nays, and sort of have two different paragraphs. And sometimes we'll even put in parentheses like what the vote was, like if there was like 4-3 or whatever it was. But at the end of the day, it's either recommends or does not recommend. So, and it's a majority. So unless like people abstain and it's like 3-3 or someone's absent, if
I feel
it's
like that's some
majority,
heavy
then it's one
malicious
way.
compliance right there. If someone abstains on purpose to try to get a tie out, I don't know if you. I don't feel like you are allowed to collude that way, but it's an interesting concept on one that, you know, everyone would actually be like, yeah, you know what, I could go either way.
Yeah, I don't know.
suppose on
I don't
tie,
know
the
how
vote
hung juries
fail.
work.
I suppose if it were tied, the vote would fail. Because you wouldn't have a majority.
I guess we would be cannot. I don't know. I've never seen that in however long I've been on this committee.
But it would depend actually on which way the motion was made. So it could fail. I mean, the motion could be to not recommend, and that would fail on a tie, or it could be to recommend, and that would also fail on a tie. So I think
We should have maybe first, not last, on that one.
Okay. Yeah, so if you're able to get the comments to me by like, at least by like, I don't know, the Friday before our meeting, that would be super great. And then I can circulate them and send them and post them on board docs and everything else. I'm not aware that there's like a requirement for me to post things on board docs like 48 hours or something before the meeting. If there is, no one's ever told me, because I usually post everything on board docs on Sunday. So if that's not right, then somebody let me know. But yeah. Okay. Oop, I gotta scroll down so you can read the rest of this. Sorry. I'm looking at the wrong window.
all right. I'd make a motion to approve the minutes of August 19th.
I will second the approval of the minutes for August 19th.
I see
Great.
something needs to be amended.
Nope.
Under
Okay.
the second paragraph under 2A ends in a comma.
Good eye.
Okay. So, do we need to remake a motion to make it
So-
as amended?
And I think that was a list, so there should be like a and or before that last clause.
And or, sorry, I'm lost. Where are we?
School committee representatives answer many questions, including this,
Ah.
this, and the value of the project to the community.
Got it.
Thanks.
All right, well, just for fun, then I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
And I will second to approve the minutes as amended of August 19th.
All right, great. Any further questions, comments, discussions, updates, typos? Nope. Okay, so I will take a vote to approve. Linda,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Mikhail,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Nathan,
Yes.
Nathaniel.
Yes.
I am also a yes. So these are approved as amended, and I will forward that to you, Linda.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will update so I think the only things left are future planning. So our next meeting is on the 9th. So I will get that posted sometime this week, and I will send you the Zoom link for that. Our special guest will be Justin and or possibly Greg. So, and we'll be able to finalize the articles. I will send out requests for updates from the school. And I think those are all the topics for the future planning. I would propose that yes?
Sorry. Just, it wasn't in the list in those minutes. Are we meeting on the 23rd? Or I'm sorry, did I miss that we talked about that, or? So we would
Oh,
meet
yes.
normally
Thank
the
you for
9th and
reminding
the
me.
23rd, but we are meeting the 30th because it's the public hearing.
Right. So thank you for reminding me. This was on my list and I potato brained. So you are correct. Our normal meeting would be on the 9th and the 23rd. Currently, the public hearing is scheduled or planned to be scheduled on the 30th, which is not one of our normal meetings, but it's 1 week before the special town meeting. So historically, that's what we've done. We've met 1 week before. So sometimes we would cancel, for example, the 23rd meeting. So then we would still only have 2 meetings in the month. And that's something I wanted to bring up as a topic to the rest of the group. To see how you would feel about the different meeting options in September. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, that's usually what we've done is like we would meet whatever 1 week is before and then cancel the meeting
Yes.
before.
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, we could potentially switch the public hearing to the 23rd, but you'll have to act quickly to get I mean, the big issue is they print it on the cover of the warrant. And I think almost by
Right.
default, they do it a week ahead. And there's no reason it can't be 2 weeks ahead. If we want it to be on the 23rd.
So I would assume that we would just have to tell him by the time we give him our sponsor comment, or not, the finance committee recommendations on the 10th.
Yes, although I think there is some value to being as close to town meeting as possible.
I
So,
agree.
You know, unless coming out of the 9th, if we have articles we haven't made a recommendation on, then we may want to do the 23rd in addition. But
Right.
I mean, for myself, I would be fine just moving the 23rd to the 30th. Because we also
I would be as
will
well.
have,
My only concern is if they add these extra articles that we haven't even seen yet.
right,
I feel like,
but we could decide that on the 9th.
correct. Yeah, I think we have that ability. I would say the question for me would be is, can people meet on the 30th? Would we have a quorum? Is that acceptable since it's not a normal Monday that we meet on?
I will not be on
Yes,
the
for me.
30th. I can't do the 30th. I can't do the 20th. I'm going to be out of the country the 23rd and the 30th,
Okay,
but I'm the only one.
everyone else is acceptable for the 30th if we did move a meeting that day? Okay,
But the 30th would work for me.
Yeah, that would work for me too.
okay, so we'll at least have a quorum, so, we'll have another a brave volunteer to take excellent notes that time.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting us know. All right. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Peter. That was on my notes and it's getting late, so it fell out of my brain. Okay, so that's the plan. I'll send this out. Do any other members have any other updates or pressing topics that you would like to address at this meeting tonight? Okay.
I guess
I am not hearing any. Are you motioning perhaps to adjourn? Are there other topics that we have tonight that I forgot about?
no, I just had a quick update from the CPC meeting I attended last week. They voted to table all conversation about the bleachers until after town meeting, and they seemed like they were leaning towards not providing any funds for it. Lisa Mead, town council, said that most of the project was not eligible, and the parts that might potentially be were not separated out in a way that they could make any determination.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's always been a challenge since they can't fund, I think it was the bathrooms and the press box and the concession stand. It could only be the bleachers, from my understanding.
I think the part that they might be able to fund is the bathrooms, but it's combined with the concessions was the issue. And they're not.
Oh,
There's a possibility that certain types of bathrooms are eligible and not necessarily the types of bathrooms we would be building with the bleachers.
yep. Okay, that's good to know. Okay. All right. Any other topics for tonight? Sounds like the budget subcommittee meeting went well. I feel like Greg gave us our update there, so I don't know if there's much else to say on that topic.
Yeah, I had quite a few notes, but he covered everything I wrote down plus more. So
Went to the Green
I feel
Meadows.
like I was told.
Sorry, I went to the Green Meadows committee. Nothing of note, really. Seems construction's starting up, or at least the pre-construction aspects, and nothing of note to report to us. I'm not really sure if there's going to ever be anything outstanding, at least for this committee's attention from that project or from that committee.
If we're doing liaison updates, I could just share mine, which is just that the Economic Development Committee doesn't seem to actually meet during the summer. So
It doesn't, sorry, it's not meeting right now?
yeah, I don't believe they meet in the summer, or at the very least, they're not meeting in August, but I'm pretty sure they have not met since May, actually. So I'm guessing it's the summer.
Okay. Thank you for that update. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, so I think that was all the topics I was hoping to cover tonight. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn, mayhaps, at 10:05 p.m.
I motion to adjourn.
All right. There's a motion.
I'll second.
Second. Oh,
Oh.
sorry, go ahead, Linda. Nope, you got it, Linda.
All right, we got a motion. We got a second. Any further discussion? All right, I'm not hearing any. Linda,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Mikhail,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Nathan,
Yes.
Nathaniel.
Yes.
I'm also a yes. Thank you, everyone, for your hard work and efforts to be able to make our recommendations before the printing deadline. Much appreciated. And we will see you on the 9th.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Bye. Have a good night.
Good one.